Chapter 2839. North, Dragon God Palace. In the sky above an island, Qin Feiyang stood with his hands behind his back, facing the wind. Next to him, Feng Daji's aura was like a rainbow, and the two heaven-defying divine artifacts were intimidating in all directions. Although there were countless disciples in the distant void, none of them dared to approach. At this moment, the island the two of them were on was the island where the Dragon God Palace grew medicinal herbs. As for the Dragon God Palace's spirit vein and crystal vein, they had long been taken into the Black Tortoise realm by Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang did not even let go of the Divine Weapon Pavilion and the Divine Art Treasury. In other words, the only resources left in the Dragon God Palace were the medicinal herbs on this island. And on the island there was the corpse of a fire dragon. It was responsible for guarding this island, and it was also a supreme expert. As for its death, it naturally died in the hands of Feng Daji. If there are no accidents with the five-clawed golden dragon, Hui, and Miss Fire Lotus, then we have really made a fortune this time. Feng Daji glanced at the corpse of the fire dragon, glanced at the medicinal field below, and chuckled. Don't worry, there won't be any accidents. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, and with a wave of his hand, divine power rolled out, instantly covering the entire island. Following closely, all the medicinal herbs on the island were uprooted and disappeared one after another. This bastard, he's too ruthless. He didn't even leave a single medicinal herb for the dragons. The disciples in the distance muttered. Go. Kill all the island masters and dismiss all the disciples. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Feiyang did not kill the disciples of the Dragon God Palace. Because he had also stayed in the Dragon God Palace before, he knew what these people had encountered. As long as they were not controlled by the Stone of Destiny, they would no longer work for the dragons. Yes. Feng Daji respectfully responded, then turned around and flew towards the crowd in the distance with a murderous aura. The group of disciples suddenly panicked. Feng Daji shouted, Young Master has ordered, only kill the island master. Everyone else scram. Only kill the island master? Everyone was stunned at first, then they looked around. He is the master of the second island. He's the master of the third island. He's the fourth island master. He is the fifth Dao island master. Immediately, all the disciples pointed at the island masters of the major islands. The island masters of the various large islands were hidden in the crowd. Their plan was to wait for Qin Feiyang and Feng Daji to leave before returning to the dragons. Because before Qin Feiyang and Feng Daji left, they didn't dare to do anything. First of all, the deterrence of the two heaven-defying divine artifacts. One heaven-defying divine artifact was enough to sweep through the Dragon God Palace, let alone two. Then it was Qin Feiyang. The masters of the major islands all knew Qin Feiyang's character. Although he was looting the herbs, he was definitely paying attention to the movements around him at the same time. If they took the opportunity to slip away quietly, they would attract Qin Feiyang's attention. So, they planned to hide and wait for Qin Feiyang and Feng Daji to leave before returning to the dragons. But they didn't expect that Qin Feiyang didn't intend to let them go at all. This was especially true with the testimony of these disciples, which exposed their true colors. They immediately fell into despair. Feng Daji, you used to follow us dragons. Please let us go this time for the sake of our past relationship. Yes. We dragons have more or less nurtured you. Please let us go. In the face of death, the masters of the major islands put down their pride as dragons and knelt in the void, looking at Feng Daji pleadingly. Shut up. I used to follow you dragons and harm the people of China. That was the greatest shame of my life. Now, you actually dare to boast shamelessly to me about friendship? If you dragons really cared about friendship, why did you use the contract of fate to control us? If you dragons really cared about friendship, why did you use us humans as cannon fodder? To put it bluntly, you are a group of selfish bastards. All of you go. The more Feng Daji spoke, the angrier he became. In the end, he was so angry that his hair stood on end. The two heaven-defying artifacts directly attacked. The masters of the major islands were killed on the spot. At the same time, hearing Feng Daji's words, the disciples who were not far away all fell silent. Yes, in the eyes of the dragons, the biggest role of humans was to serve as cannon fodder. Such a dragon was not worthy of their pursuit at all. In the sky above the island, Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Daji and then looked at the disciples. A smile appeared on his face. It seemed that these disciples were not at the point where they could not be saved. Of course, he could also see that not all disciples had this kind of awareness. A portion of them were still unswervingly loyal to the Dragon Clan. As for these people, they naturally deserve to die. Feiyang, come to the castle quickly. Suddenly, Qin Rushuang's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang's eyes dodged. He took a step and landed in a valley on the island below, avoiding everyone's sight, and then entered the castle. In the castle, not only Qin Rushuang but also a shadow. This figure was none other than Qin Badian. Ancestor. Qin Feiyang bowed. As you expected, the dragon sent a large number of half-step imperishable realm experts to the east, west, south, and north. Qin Badian smiled. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and asked, "How many?" Qin Badian said, "According to various statistics, there are 1,000 people." "So many?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. He did expect that Long Zun would send people to the east, west, north, and south to cause a bloody storm to divert his attention, because he believed that Long Zun wouldn't watch the 4 dragon god palaces be destroyed in his hands. And now, facing these heaven-defying divine artifacts in his hands, Long Zun had no other choice but to use the tactic of diverting the target. Therefore, before the operation, Qin Feiyang asked Qin Rushuang to send a message to the ancestor, asking him to lead the people of the Dragon Slayer Palace to lurk near important cities like Holy Dragon City. Because if he wanted to quickly cause a big storm to divert his attention, large cities like Holy Dragon City were the best targets. And Qin Feiyang's arrangement could also protect these innocent creatures from the disaster of a tragic death. But what Qin Feiyang didn't expect was that the dragons would send 1,000 half-step imperishable realm experts. This was really a shocking number. Qin Badian said, "There's also a supreme expert who just reached the imperishable realm. This person is called Li Chang and he's quite strong." "Li Chang?" Qin Feiyang muttered and asked, "What about the great ancestral dragons?" "I didn't see any of the great ancestral dragons." Qin Badian shook his head. "I think they should be planning to hide in the space divine object first, and wait for Li Chang and the other cannon fodder to kill their way into the major cities. Then, when I go to support them, they will take the opportunity to sneak into the 4 great dragon god palaces and take away the resources and disciples of the dragon god palaces." Qin Feiyang said. Qin Badian asked, "Then how are you guys doing now?" "I'm done here. But I don't know about Fire Lotus, Huiyi, and the 5-clawed golden dragon." After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he looked at the training room beside him and shouted, "Dan Wangkai." Dan Wangkai ran out with a medicinal fragrance all over his body. Obviously, he was refining pills. "Immediately send a message to Fire Lotus, Huiyi, and the 5-clawed golden dragon and ask them about their progress," Qin Feiyang said. "All right." Dan Wangkai nodded and immediately took out the image crystal. Before the operation, Qin Feiyang had thought that there might be all kinds of sudden changes, so he had everyone establish a contract bridge with each other to facilitate communication. Qin Badian said, "Then what's our next step?" "Stop them and don't let them enter the city. I will also rush to the Holy Dragon City immediately. It's best to keep these people alive and try to subdue them as much as possible," Qin Feiyang said. After all, they were all undead stage experts. If they could all be subdued, then their overall strength would instantly increase by countless times. "All right." Qin Badian nodded. When Qin Baishan's shadow dissipated, Qin Feiyang turned to look at Dan Wangkai and said, "Tell me about Fire Lotus's progress later." After that, Qin Feiyang looked up at the second floor and shouted, "Li Changhe." Li Changhe also immediately walked out. "Come with me." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and appeared in the valley with Li Changhe. "Young master, what can I do?" Li Changhe was suspicious. "Of course." Qin Feiyang took out an illusory form pill and gave it to Li Changhe. "What does this mean?" Li Changhe looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. "This is the key step of the plan. You will disguise yourself as me and go to the Holy Dragon City with Feng Daji," Qin Feiyang said. "I will disguise myself as you?" Li Changhe was slightly stunned and frowned. "What about you?" Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Of course I will take the opportunity to sneak into the Divine Dragon Island." That's right. This was his plan, to enter the Divine Dragon Island. Let Li Changhe disguise himself as him and appear in the Holy Dragon City ostentatiously. This way, the ancestral dragon would definitely lower his guard and enter the Dragon God Palace. At that time, Qin Feiyang could follow these ancestral dragons and sneak into the Divine Dragon Island. As for how to get out of the Divine Dragon Island after finding Yi Shui, and the other 2, he hadn't thought about it yet. Let's sneak into the Divine Dragon Island first. You really want to go? Li Changhe raised his eyebrows. Would I joke about something like this? Qin Feiyang smiled slightly and said, "Hurry up." "All right. Li Changhe nodded. He knew Qin Feiyang's temper. Once he decided on something, he would not change his mind. Thus, he took the illusory form pill and changed into Qin Feiyang's appearance. Li Changhe had followed Qin Feiyang for so long, so he knew Qin Feiyang very well. Moreover, his cultivation was the same as Qin Feiyang's. Therefore, if he were to disguise himself as Qin Feiyang, there would be almost no flaws. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also took a illusory form pill and turned into an ordinary-looking young man. Next, Qin Feiyang then put on the clothes of the Dragon God Palace and pretended to be an ordinary disciple. Li Changhe, on the other hand, put on Qin Feiyang's clothes and tidied up his expression. At that moment, a living Qin Feiyang appeared in front of Qin Feiyang's eyes. Qin Feiyang sized up Li Changhe for a moment. Even he himself could not see any flaws, so he could completely pass off as the real deal. Although your current temperament and appearance are exactly the same as mine, other things such as divine power and divine arts cannot be changed, so you must not make a move. Qin Feiyang warned. I know. Li Changhe nodded. Then go. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Chapter 2840. Be careful. After Li Changhe finished speaking, he soared into the air and flew towards Feng Daji. He asked, "Are you done?" "Yes." Feng Daji nodded. "Okay, I just received news that Long Zun has sent 1,000 Eternal Realm Masters. Let's go to the Holy Dragon City and have a look." Li Changhe. "What? 1,000? Feng Daji was shocked. "Yes. But everything is as I expected. Since these people are here, they can forget about going back. Let's go." Li Changhe waved his hand. Feng Daji immediately opened an altar and jumped on it with Li Changhe. Li Changhe was really good at pretending. Even Feng Daji didn't see through it, let alone the others. What should we do now? Countless disciples stood in the void and looked at the devastated Dragon God Temple. For a moment they were all at a loss. There was a moment of silence. Someone said, "It wasn't easy to regain our freedom. Of course we should leave this damn place." "That's right. We can't believe the nonsense of the dragons anymore. And I have to tell the true face of the dragons to everyone around me. These bastards simply don't treat us as human beings." People kept echoing him, full of anger. "That's a nice way to put it. Do you think you can be a decent person after leaving the dragons? Let me tell you, the dragons are the rulers of this land after all. No matter where you go, your fate is in the hands of the dragons." Someone sneered. Obviously, those who could say such words were undoubtedly the most loyal pawns of the dragons. I would believe that in the past. But now, look at Qin Feiyang. He has been in the Dragon God Temple for so long. Have the dragons ever appeared? No. What does this mean? It means that the dragons are afraid of Qin Feiyang now. What's more, Qin Feiyang is not alone. He has a lot of heaven-defying divine artifacts and the dragon-slaying temple behind him. I think it won't be long before the ruler of the divine land changes. Someone snorted. Change? You're too naive. The dragons of the Dragon Slayer Palace and the Dragon Clan have been fighting for so many years. Is it effective? Not at all. They only talk big. When they really meet the dragons, it's like a mouse meeting a cat. As for Qin Feiyang, although he has many heaven-defying divine weapons, don't forget that the dragons have sovereign divine weapons. No matter how many heaven-defying divine weapons there are, they're nothing but cannon fodder in the face of a sovereign weapon. Everyone argued endlessly. At this moment, Qin Feiyang had also left the valley and quietly blended into the crowd. He didn't say anything and just calmly watched the people arguing. Young Master Huiyi and the others have replied. Everything is progressing smoothly. Dan Wangsai's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Very good. Send them to reinforce the Dragon Slayer Palace and intercept the dragon's minions. Qin Feiyang thought. All right. Dan Wangkai responded and immediately sent a message to Fire Lotus and the other two. Let's not talk about it anymore. If you guys are willing to continue being the dragon's lackeys, then you guys can continue. Anyway, I don't want to. Goodbye. A young man snorted coldly, turned around, opened an altar, and left without looking back. I'm leaving too. I've had enough of this kind of life that's worse than pigs and dogs. With one person taking the lead, the others would quickly make a decision. At this moment, most of the people had opened the altar and left the Dragon God Palace. The entrance to the Dragon God Palace had already been destroyed by the heaven-defying divine weapons when Qin Feiyang and Feng Daji came in, so they could now enter and leave as they pleased. Those who stayed were naturally the most loyal minions of the dragons. And Qin Feiyang was also there. North Inland Sea. A group of people rushed out and entered the Dragon God mountain range. The person in the lead was Li Chang. 1,000 people were divided into 4 waves heading to the north, west, south, and east. In other words, there were 250 people in each wave. 250 people, 250 supreme experts. Such a terrifying lineup was enough to flatten the north. Li Chang stopped and shouted, "Do you still remember Lord Ancestral Dragon's instructions?" "Yes." More than 200 people nodded. "Alright then. Now we'll split into 3 teams and head to Holy Dragon City, Serpent City, and Snow Dragon City. Let go of me and kill." Li Chang shouted. "Yes." Everyone replied respectfully, their killing intent overflowing. "Li Chang, as a human you actually helped the dragons to harm your own kind. You're really awe-inspiring." Suddenly, an angry shout rang out. Li Chang was shocked and immediately turned to look. In the void in front of him, a middle-aged man appeared out of thin air. Qin Badian. Immediately, more than 200 people's faces changed. If that wasn't Qin Badian, who could it be? His 7-foot body was tall and straight like an iron pine. He held a sharp broken sword in his hand, and his entire body was filled with a murderous aura. "Why are you here?" Li Chang was shocked. "Not only is Emperor Qin here, I'm here too." Behind the group of people, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Li Chang and the others looked and saw a golden figure appear in the void behind them. It was a middle-aged man with a square face. His height was different from ordinary people and he was more than 3 meters tall. And in his hand he was holding a golden harpoon. This harpoon was 5 to 6 meters long and seemed to be cast in gold, emitting a dazzling divine light. This person's body was shining with golden light. Standing in the void, he was like a god descending to the world, and a great pressure enveloped all directions. Mermaid Emperor. Li Chang's face changed again. That's right. This person was the legendary first-generation Mermaid Emperor. Why are you ambushing here? Could it be that the dragons have spies? Spies? Li Chang looked at the Mermaid Emperor and Qin Badian and roared in shock and anger. He never thought that he would meet Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor halfway. The two of them were both peak experts of the ancient realm. Qin Badian, needless to say, was at the great achievement Eternal Realm, comparable to the Ancestral Dragon. And the Mermaid Emperor was also at the minor achievement Eternal Realm. The most important thing was that Qin Badian also had a heaven-defying divine artifact in the power of law. Just based on Qin Badian's strength alone, it was enough to kill them in an instant. Spies. Spies. If we really have spies and spies on Divine Dragon Island, our Dragon Slayer Palace would have already taken action. Qin Badian said. Li Chang said, "Then how did you know we would come to the north? Isn't that simple? Feiyang has caused such a big commotion. Will the dragons just sit back and watch? Of course not. Since they won't, they will naturally send people to the north, east, west and south. So we will wait here waiting for you to come to our door." Qin Badian said lightly. "Damn it." Li Chang cursed and roared, "Everyone break out with all your strength." Boom. More than 200 people suddenly released their auras, and the earth and void here collapsed and shattered. Stubborn. Qin Badian snorted coldly, and the power of the purple gold divine dragon roared out. A 10,000-foot barrier instantly appeared, enveloping everyone and sealing the divine power of Li Chang and the others. After all, there were 250 supreme experts. If their auras were not sealed, not to mention the Dragon God Mountain Range, even the outer Holy Dragon City would be destroyed. Great Achievement Eternal Realm. You have suddenly reached the Great Achievement Eternal Realm. Li Chang's face was full of fear. Not to mention Qin Badian's heaven-defying divine artifact and the power of law, just this cultivation was enough to make them despair. Just stay here quietly. If you dare to make a move, kill without mercy. The Mermaid Emperor said coldly, then landed beside Qin Badian and said, "My lord, what's next?" Qin Badian glanced at the group and said, "Next, let's wait for Feiyang to deal with it." Damn it. Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor, these two bastards actually appeared here. Not far away in the void. The Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon and the Blood Dragon Ancestral Dragon hid in the spatial divine item and looked at this scene with a gloomy face. Their original plan was to let these people cause trouble in the major cities to attract Qin Feiyang's attention. But now these people were stopped by Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor. Wasn't the plan ruined? Quickly send a message to Lord Dragon Sovereign and ask if there is a second plan? The Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon said in a deep voice. The Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon nodded and took out the image crystal. But at this moment, Whoosh. Accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, two figures sped over like lightning. Wait. The black dragon ancestral dragon reached out to stop the fire dragon ancestral dragon and said, "Look, it's Qin Feiyang." The fire dragon ancestral dragon looked up, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Outside, Qin Badian and the mermaid emperor also turned to look, and a smile immediately appeared on their faces. Li Changhe, who was disguised as Qin Feiyang, flew over and bowed, "Greetings, ancestors." "Greetings, Emperor Qin, mermaid emperor." Feng Daji also bowed respectfully. "No need to be so polite." Qin Badian waved his hand and smiled. He pointed to Li Chang and the others who were trapped in the realm and said, "Feiyang, these people have been stopped. You can do as you see fit." Li Changhe looked up. To be honest, he didn't know what to do. Qin Feiyang meant to subdue these people, but how? These people were all controlled by the fake contract, and with his ability, there was no way to remove them. This was truly a difficult problem. "What's wrong?" Qin Badian looked at Li Changhe suspiciously. Li Changhe quivered and shook his head. "Nothing, nothing." Then, Li Changhe raised his head and looked at Li Chang and the others and said, "Answer me, do you want to die or live?" Hearing this, Li Chang and the others looked at Li Changhe with hesitation. "This is bad." Seeing the scene outside, the black dragon ancestral dragon's face changed slightly. He immediately looked at the fire dragon ancestral dragon and said, "Quickly send a message, report to Lord Dragon Sovereign." Fire dragon ancestral dragon awakening image crystal. Long Zun's figure appeared. The two of them quickly explained the situation to Long Zun. Long Zun's heart also sank and said, "While Qin Feiyang is not in the Dragon God Palace, quickly go to the Dragon God Palace and see how many people and resources are left." "Yes, sir." The two of them responded and immediately controlled the spatial divine object, flying towards the Dragon God Palace. Outside, Li Changhe looked at the reaction of Li Chang and the others, and couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile in his eyes. Since they were hesitating, then it shouldn't be difficult to subdue them. Chapter 28:41. Feng Daji looked at the group of people and said, "As long as you leave the dragons and stop helping them, the young master can help you regain your freedom." The corner of Li Changhe's mouth twitched. The young master wasn't here at all, how could he help them regain their freedom? However, he couldn't reveal any flaws now. Who knew if there were any Dragon Clan members secretly monitoring them nearby? Once the dragons knew that this Qin Feiyang was impersonated by him, they would definitely be suspicious. Where was the real Qin Feiyang? What was he planning? In short, once the dragons became suspicious, they might destroy the young master's plan. Yes. Li Changhe braced himself and nodded at Li Chang and the others. Li Chang and the others looked at each other and were about to speak. Boom. However, at this moment, a terrifying divine might descended. Long Zun appeared out of thin air and pointed his finger in the air. A divine power fell and blasted on the barrier. The barrier shattered on the spot. Long Zun, Li Changhe and Feng Daji's pupils shrank. Although there were rules and restrictions in the internal sea, this restriction did not restrict Long Zun. In other words, if Qin Feiyang and the others wanted to go to Divine Dragon Island, they had to pass through the internal sea. But Long Zun did not need to. The ancestral dragons did not need to either. They could instantly leave the Divine Dragon Island and could also instantly enter the Divine Dragon Island. "Do you want a rebel?" Long Zun glanced at Li Chang and the others. "We don't dare." The group of people quickly lowered their heads, their faces full of fear. Long Zun snorted and looked at the Mermaid Emperor and Qin Badian before looking at Li Changhe and Feng Daji. Boom. The next moment, a monstrous aura erupted. A beam of divine power suddenly descended and charged towards Li Changhe. Long Zun did not know that this Qin Feiyang was impersonated by Li Changhe, so he wanted to kill him the moment they met. "Do you think we don't exist?" Qin Badian stepped forward and waved the broken sword in his hand. It did not recover, but Long Zun's divine power was instantly annihilated. "Are you declaring war openly?" Long Zun stared at Qin Badian. "Not bad." Qin Badian nodded. The Mermaid Emperor looked up at Long Zun. His aura was terrifying as he shouted, "Do you dare accept my challenge?" "Good, very good." The Dragon Sovereign laughed in anger. "You've sent people to the north, west, south, and east. But now the situation in the west, south, and east should be similar to this. You can save people like Li Chang, but can you save the people in the west, south, and east?" Feng Daji sneered. Long Zun's eyes were gloomy. When she heard that Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor were intercepting Li Chang and the others here, she had already guessed that the west, east and south must be the same. There must be people from the Dragon Slayer Palace lying in ambush. In other words, the plan that she had come up with on the spot was of no use at all. Instead, she had sacrificed so many supreme experts for nothing. Young master has already predicted what you want to do. To be more precise, you've been led by the nose by the young master. So you'd better stop struggling. Just stand there and take the beating. Feng Daji sneered. Long Zun looked at Li Changhe, his eyes flashing with shocking killing intent. Although Li Changhe looked calm on the surface, he was panicking inside. Because after all, he was not the real Qin Feiyang. Moreover, because Long Zun was too strong, anyone would feel an instinctive fear when facing Long Zun, and Li Changhe was no exception. Therefore, Li Changhe was feeling very uncomfortable now. While suppressing this fear, he had to face Long Zun head-on. He could not show any flaws. At the same time, the Dragon God Palace. Most of the disciples had already left. But even if there was only a small portion left, there were still hundreds of thousands of people. Qin Feiyang was mixed in the crowd, watching all of this with disappointment in his eyes. It seemed that no matter what he did, he could not make these people turn back. However, at this moment he did not have any killing intent. Because if these people were all dead, then when the ancestral dragon came, there would be no way to act. Boom. Suddenly, two terrifying auras appeared. They're finally here. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Looking up, he saw Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon and Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon appearing out of thin air. Damn it, all the resources are gone. Looking at the empty Dragon God Palace, the two of them were furious. Greetings, Lord Ancestral Dragon. This was all done by Qin Feiyang. Not only did he snatch all the resources, he also killed the island masters. Lord, this Qin Feiyang truly deserves to die 10,000 times. A group of people shouted in anger. Only these few people are left? Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon looked at the disciples below, his eyes filled with anger. These humans were indeed a bunch of ingrates that couldn't be raised properly. The rest is the essence. Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon transmitted his voice. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon was stunned and nodded. That's right, in the face of such a situation they still chose to stay, which means that they are truly loyal to us dragons. These people can be trained. Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon smiled, looked at the disciples below and said, "Thank you for your loyalty. We dragons will not treat you unfairly. Now we will bring you to Divine Dragon Island. Divine Dragon Island has better cultivation resources than here." Thank you, Lord Ancestral Dragon, for your training. Hundreds of thousands of people were excited, kneeling in the air to thank him. Qin Feiyang also squatted down, pretending to roar. Then you guys go to this sovereign space divine object first. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon waved his hand, an invisible force descended, and hundreds of thousands of people disappeared in an instant, including Qin Feiyang. This also meant that his plan to sneak into Divine Dragon Island had succeeded. Dragon God Mountain Range. At this moment it was extremely quiet. Although Feng Daji was holding onto the two heaven-defying divine artifacts, eager to give it a try, Li Changhe did not dare to make a move without permission. But, suddenly, the image crystal in Long Zun's arms rang. Long Zun felt it, but he did not take out the image crystal. He lowered his head and looked at Li Changhe, saying, "Little bastard, if you have the ability, then come and kill your way to Divine Dragon Island." After saying that, he waved his hand and swept up Li Chang and the others. He turned around and disappeared into the inner sea without looking back. "Don't even think about leaving." Feng Daji shouted, grabbing the two heaven-defying divine artifacts. He was ready to chase after them. "Don't chase." Li Changhe immediately pulled Feng Daji back. "Young master, why don't you chase?" Feng Daji was startled and frowned. Li Changhe shook his head. "What is Long Zun's cultivation level? What is your cultivation level? Can you catch up?" But, what else did Feng Daji want to say? "Don't say it yet." Li Changhe raised his hand to stop Feng Daji, turned to look at Qin Badian and asked, "Do you have a space divine object?" Qin Badian nodded. Li Changhe said, "Then let's go to the space divine object to talk." "All right." Qin Badian nodded, and brought the Mermaid Emperor, Li Changhe, and Feng Daji to a stone room that was about 100 feet tall. Li Changhe scanned his surroundings. Inside the space divine object, even if the dragons had people lurking nearby, they would not be able to hear their conversation. Then, Li Changhe looked at Feng Daji and said, "Not to mention you, I'm afraid that even the Qin Emperor does not have the confidence to catch up to Long Zun." After saying that, Li Changhe looked at Qin Badian and said, Qin Emperor, am I right? Long Zun's cultivation is too strong. In terms of speed, no one can compare to her. If we want to keep her, we have to kill her when she's unprepared. Or, she can stay behind and fight us head-on. Qin Badian nodded. Feng Daji's face was filled with unwillingness. But suddenly, he turned to look at Li Changhe and asked suspiciously, "Wait, why did you call him Qin Emperor?" In the past, the young master had always called Qin Badian ancestor. Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor looked at each other and also looked at Li Changhe suspiciously. "This is the second reason why I didn't let you chase after her." Li Changhe smiled bitterly at Feng Daji, took out a facial restoration pill and threw it into his mouth, immediately restoring his true appearance. "Li, why are you here?" Feng Daji was stunned. Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor were also stunned. "The young master asked me to take his place. The young master is not here. I don't have the guts to let you take the risk to chase after Long Zun." Li Changhe shook his head. "If the young master is not here, then where is he?" Feng Daji asked. "Didn't the young master say that he was going to the Divine Dragon Island to save Yi Shui, and the other two? I guess he has already entered the Divine Dragon Island." Li Changhe. "He really went?" Feng Daji's expression froze. "What? He entered the Divine Dragon Island?" Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor were also shocked when they heard this. "Yes." Li Changhe nodded. Qin Badian frowned and said, "Why didn't he tell me about this when we were discussing it?" "The young master knew that if you knew that he had entered the Divine Dragon Island, you would definitely stop him. Therefore, he only told you about the plan to seal off the Divine Dragon Island and snatch the resources of the Dragon God Palace. He also ordered us not to reveal this to you before he entered the Divine Dragon Island." Li Changhe sighed. "Nonsense, this is really nonsense. Rushuang, how could she hide such an important thing from me?" Qin Badian was furious. "Miss Rushuang knows the young master's temper too well. She knew that she couldn't stop the young master, so she hid it from you with us." Li Changhe. "You guys have no idea how terrifying the Divine Dragon Island is. Feiyang's trip is a one-way trip." Qin Badian looked at Li Changhe and Feng Daji helplessly and sighed. "The Divine Dragon Island is even more terrifying now. There is a barrier set up by the Dragon God." The Mermaid Emperor said. "Yes. What should we do now?" Qin Badian rubbed his forehead, his face full of worry. Li Changhe said firmly, "I believe the young master will have a way." "I believe so too." Feng Daji nodded, then looked at Qin Badian and said, "Send me out. From now on, my duty is to seal off the northern inland sea." Qin Badian glanced at Feng Daji, then turned to the Mermaid Emperor and said, "You also go back to the dragon-slaying palace immediately and mobilize all the divine generals to protect the people of the divine prefecture." "Okay." The Mermaid Emperor nodded. Li Changhe also took a phantom elixir and changed into Qin Feiyang's appearance again. Then, Qin Badian led the four of them out of the spatial treasure. The Mermaid Emperor opened an altar and left. Qin Badian and Li Changhe accompanied Feng Daji to the coast of the inland sea. "Old Feng, your task is very difficult." Li Changhe glanced at the sea and said to Feng Daji, "As long as I am here, the dragons will not be able to step into the inland sea." Feng Daji waved his hand, and two heaven-defying divine artifacts rushed into the sky, and the terrifying divine power sealed off the entire northern coast. Qin Badian looked at Feng Daji, his eyes full of admiration. Even in the dragon-slaying palace, there weren't many people with such courage and boldness. Feiyang, this brat, was indeed a very outstanding leader. Then, Qin Badian raised his head and looked in the direction of the Divine Dragon Island, his eyes full of worry again. Chapter 2842. East, West and South. Just as Feng Daji said, the people who went to these three places were not so lucky. A total of 750 people fell into the hands of the Dragon Slayer Palace and the Fire Lotus. There was also a rolling mountain range outside the inner sea. At this moment, the flames of war burned. A huge barrier sealed off the entire mountain range. A middle-aged man stood outside the barrier. This man was Lu Xingyang. This barrier was set up by Lu Xingyang. As a great achievement imperishable realm expert, it was too easy to imprison a half-step imperishable realm expert. Just inside the barrier, the five-clawed golden dragon was like a demon god, crazily slaughtering the 250 half-step imperishable realm experts. "Don't kill me, I beg you." The five-clawed golden dragon's methods were originally very fierce. Every time he attacked, a half-step imperishable realm expert would fall. Blood dyed the barrier red. The five-clawed golden dragon was crazily killing, but the people who were killed were terrified to the extreme. They were not weak. Even in the entire ancient world, a half-step imperishable realm cultivator could be considered a peak expert. In the eyes of the Nine Heavens realm, paragon gods and divine lords, they were like gods. If the five-clawed golden dragon did not have a heaven-defying divine artifact, the 250 half-step imperishable realm experts could still fight. After all, the five-clawed golden dragon's cultivation was only a small realm higher than theirs. Initial achievement: imperishable realm. But now, the five-clawed golden dragon had two heaven-defying divine artifacts in his hands. Killing them would be as easy as flipping his hand. This was the terror of heaven-defying divine artifacts. Not to mention those weaker than the five-clawed golden dragon, even those with higher cultivation would still die. However, these people's pleas did not make the five-clawed golden dragon feel any pity. Clang. With a wave of his hand, a golden sword appeared. The sword was 3 fingers wide and 1 meter long, with a golden dragon engraved on its shoulder. This sword was the golden dragon ancestor dragon's heaven-defying divine artifact. The five-clawed golden dragon grabbed the sword and slashed. It did not revive. But even if it did not revive, its edge was unstoppable. These half-step imperishable realm experts also had divine artifacts, but the highest was only a paragon divine artifact. Clang. How could a sovereign-grade divine artifact be compared to a heaven-defying divine artifact? The divine weapon in the hands of one of them shattered on the spot. The golden battle sword descended, and that person was instantly cleaved into 2 halves. His divine soul was directly annihilated. Bastard, I'll kill you. Seeing this, suddenly, a destructive aura rushed out of his body. Self-detonation. You also need to have a chance to self-destruct. The five-clawed golden dragon waved its hand, and another heaven-defying divine artifact, the blood-red dagger, shot out. It instantly sank into the man's chi. A bloody hole appeared and blood gushed out. Following closely, the five-clawed golden dragon waved its golden battle sword and killed that person. The whole process was smooth and without any hesitation. They didn't even have the chance to self-detonate, and the group of people fell into despair. The five-clawed golden dragon slashed one by one, and the 200 or so people quickly fell to the ground, completely wiped out. Above the barrier, Lu Xingyang's heart ached when he saw this. These people were all half-step invincible realm. If they all joined the Dragon Slayer Palace, the overall strength of the Dragon Slayer Palace would instantly skyrocket. What's there to feel sorry for? Young Master isn't here. Even if we keep them, there's no way to break their fake contract. Besides, do you think Long Zun will be stupid enough to give them to us? Not surprisingly. She will either come personally to save these people, or directly activate the fake contract to erase their divine souls. In short, she would rather destroy them than let us get such a big advantage. The five-clawed golden dragon saw through Lu Xingyang's thoughts and said coldly. Even so, seeing them fall one after another with my own eyes, I can't help but feel sorry. Lu Xingyang sighed. As long as they are humans who follow the dragons, they deserve to die. There was no sympathy in the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes. He stepped out and landed on the coast. Dragons? Looking in the direction of the divine dragon island, the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes flashed coldly and he shouted, "Seal!" Clang. The blood-red short blade and the golden battle sword immediately soared into the sky. A terrifying divine might that could topple mountains and overturn the seas quickly sealed off the entire eastern inland sea. Western region. Fire Lotus also assisted the people of the dragon-slaying palace in capturing the 250 people alive. On the coast, Fire Lotus wore a mask as she stood in the air, looking in the direction of the divine dragon island, her face full of worry. She would never doubt Qin Feiyang's decision. Since Qin Feiyang had decided to go to the divine dragon island, then he would definitely go. And she would not persuade him. Because she understood Qin Feiyang better than Li Changhe and the others. Rather than persuade him, it was better to silently support him. It was just that the divine dragon island was a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Qin Feiyang going alone to take the risk was truly worrying. "Miss Fire Lotus, what are you looking at?" A middle-aged man dressed in black walked over. He was about 1.8 meters tall, and his dark pupils were like 2 black holes, seemingly able to capture one's soul. Also, his cultivation was extremely terrifying. He was apparently an undead overlord at the initial success stage. Nothing. Fire Lotus shook her head and smiled. Clang. As she waved her hand, 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts flew into the sky. One of them was the rusty axe. The other was a white thin sword that looked like it was carved out of jade. It was the heaven-defying divine artifact of the white dragon ancestor dragon. The power of the two divine artifacts spread in all directions and completely sealed off the western inland sea. I didn't expect heaven-defying divine artifacts to be able to grow. The man in black shook his head. That's why these heaven-defying divine artifacts followed Qin Dage. Fire Lotus smiled and turned around to look not far away. The ground there was shattered. Apparently there had been a thrilling battle before. At this moment, the 250 people sent by the dragon ancestor were standing together awkwardly. There was a barrier around them that trapped them. Fire Lotus asked, "Senior Black Wing Emperor, what should we do with these people?" That's right. This man in black was the first Black Wing Emperor who had followed Qin Badian for many years. Senior? The Black Wing Emperor shook his head and smiled bitterly. In terms of seniority, I'm still your junior. But you're stronger than me now. Fire Lotus said. The Black Wing Emperor shook his head and smiled. Let's address each other as equals. Fire Lotus thought for a moment and nodded. That's fine. The Black Wing Emperor looked at those people and said, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for Fei Yang to deal with this. Qin Dage, Fire Lotus murmured. Qin Dage might have already entered Divine Dragon Island. Waiting for him to deal with this was unrealistic. Just as Fire Lotus was pondering, those 250 people suddenly screamed at the same time, their expressions extremely painful. Then they fell to the ground one by one and died. What's going on? Fire Lotus and the Black Wing Emperor turned pale with fright. The Black Wing Emperor released his divine will and checked. He exclaimed, Their divine souls have been erased. Their divine souls have been erased. Fire Lotus's gaze trembled. She suddenly turned around and scanned the sky above the inland sea. Suddenly, Fire Lotus's gaze locked onto a certain spot in the sea, and a cold light surged in her eyes. A blurry figure stood amidst the rolling waves. Longzuan. The Black Wing Emperor also looked over, and his pitch-black eyes immediately surged with a cold light. That's right. That blurry figure was Longzuan. The two heaven-defying divine weapons, the axe, had already sealed off the coast. She did not dare to take the risk to rescue them, so she simply erased those people's divine souls. Her methods were truly ruthless. Looking at Fire Lotus and the Black Wing Emperor from afar, Longzuan did not say anything and directly disappeared. To the south, the same scene happened. More than 200 people who were imprisoned fell to the ground at the same time, dead. Hoi stood together with a middle-aged man in white. When he saw this sudden scene, he immediately turned around and scanned the sea. They also saw Longzuan in a certain part of the sea. Go and tell Qin Feiyang not to think that he can do whatever he wants just because he has a heaven-defying divine weapon. The good show is yet to come. Longzuan left these words and disappeared without a trace. The good show is yet to come? Hoi raised his eyebrows. The man in white next to him smiled gently and said, Even a rabbit will bite when it's cornered, let alone dragons. Then I'd like to see what tricks they have up their sleeves. Hoi smiled coldly, turned to look at the man in white and said, White Wing Emperor, I alone am enough here. Go and find Qin Badian and ask him to immediately send people to assist the city lords of the major cities to completely eliminate the claws of the dragons of the divine land. Okay. The man in white nodded, opened an altar and left. After Hoi watched the man in white leave, he looked up in the direction of Divine Dragon Island and sneered, Dragons, your end is coming. Not long after, Holy Dragon City. A black armored masked man appeared, and his terrifying aura was not concealed at all. Whoosh. The black armored man directly rushed into the city lord mansion. Greetings, Lord Divine General. Jiang Dafei immediately greeted him. Where's the messenger of the dragons? The black armored man asked. After learning about the movements of the dragon god palaces, he has already gone into hiding. But I have sent people to secretly follow him. Do you know where he is now? Jiang Dafei said. The messenger of the dragons in Holy Dragon City was the former palace lord of the dragon god palace. Okay. Bring me there. The black armored man's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his entire body was filled with a murderous aura. Jiang Dafei was stunned and asked, Lord, are you going to attack the dragons? Yes. The Qin Emperor has ordered all the major cities of the divine land to completely eliminate the claws of the dragons. The black armored man said. Okay. I've been waiting for this day. Jiang Dafei was extremely excited and asked, What about the young lord now? I don't know. The black armored man shook his head. He really did not know because the Qin Emperor did not tell anyone about Qin Feiyang sneaking into the Divine Dragon Island. It was better to be safe than sorry. Only by keeping this secret could they ensure Qin Feiyang's safety to the greatest extent. Jiang Dafei smiled and said, "The young lord must be planning something big. You have so much confidence in him?" The black-armored man was surprised. "Yes." Jiang Dafei nodded. The black-armored man shook his head helplessly. Why did he feel that in the eyes of Jiang Dafei and the others, Qin Feiyang's status was higher than the Qin Emperor's? Perhaps this was Qin Feiyang's charm. No matter where he went, he could get a group of loyal followers. Chapter 2843. As the Dragon Slayer Palace made their move, the entire Divine Prefecture fell into chaos. Falling into chaos was inevitable. After all, such a big thing couldn't be done quietly. At the same time, in the sky above a certain mountain range, hundreds of thousands of people gathered together, looking around curiously. These people were the disciples of the Northern Dragon God Palace. Qin Feiyang was also in the crowd. And now, they were still in the Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon's spatial divine item. The interior of this spatial divine item was very large, with undulating mountains and rivers. Although there were no fierce beasts, it was filled with rich essence and energy. Qin Feiyang had secretly checked it at the first moment. This spatial divine item could at least hold millions of people. And there were many spirit veins and crystal veins underground. Of course, the spirit veins and crystal veins here couldn't be compared to the Black Tortoise realm. One had to know. Just the Northern Dragon God Palace alone had hundreds of thousands of spirit veins and crystal veins. Could be said that, this time, the 4 divine dragon palaces could instantly improve the cultivation environment of the Black Tortoise realm by dozens or hundreds of times. In other words, when the time came, as long as Hoi-E, Fire Lotus and 5-clawed Golden Dragon put the spirit veins they robbed into the Black Tortoise realm, then in terms of cultivation environment, the Black Tortoise realm would directly surpass the Divine Prefecture. At the same time, with the nurturing of these spirit veins and crystal veins, the Black Tortoise realm's growth speed would instantly soar countless times. They believed that in a few million years or tens of millions of years, the Black Tortoise realm would truly be comparable to the ancient realm. A few million years or tens of millions of years, in the outside world this was very long. But for the Black Tortoise realm it was quite fast. 1 day was 1,000 years, 10 days was 10,000 years, 100 days was 100,000 years, 1,000 days was 1,000,000 years, 1,000 days was just a little more than 3 years. 3 years was just a blink of an eye in the eyes of mortals, let alone cultivators. So the current Black Tortoise realm was very scary. Of course. And the creatures in the Black Tortoise realm, as the cultivation environment improved, they would also become stronger. For example, Pai Lupi and Theta Wang were now powerhouses of the 9th Heaven realm. Perhaps after a while, he would have to start breaking through to the imperishable realm. As long as the Black Tortoise world gave birth to an undead realm expert, the Black Tortoise world would undergo a huge transformation. Until then, the Black Tortoise world was no longer a small world. It was a great world that could be compared to the ancient world. It's already been so long, why is there still no movement at all? Could it be that we haven't reached the Divine Dragon Island yet? Someone asked suspiciously. Qin Feiyang glanced at that person and casually asked, "Are you that impatient to see the Divine Dragon Island?" Of course. To me, the Divine Dragon Island is a holy land. Look at the past. Only those who have broken through to the half-step undead realm are qualified to enter Divine Dragon Island. People like us don't even dare to think about it. And now, I have the chance to enter Divine Dragon Island. Of course, I am a little impatient. After that, the man looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Don't you want to?" "Yes, of course. It's just that Lord Ancestral Dragon hasn't appeared yet. It's useless even if we think about it." Qin Feiyang laughed. "I thought you didn't want to." That person pursed his lips. "Who doesn't want to see such a legendary place as soon as possible? I'm just thinking, is this Divine Dragon Island as magical as the legends say?" Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with curiosity. "This is a must. After all, it's the dragon's headquarters. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's just talk about the Dragon God Palace. I believe that the Divine Dragon Island is definitely countless times better than the Dragon God Palace." That person said. "Makes sense." Qin Feiyang nodded. Outside, Divine Dragon Island. Inside the main hall, Long Zun sat at the top, while the 10 great ancestral dragons stood respectfully below. "How's the situation?" Long Zun scanned the 10 great ancestral dragons. Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon looked at Long Zun and said, "Old Black and I brought back more than 300,000 people, but the resources..." Speaking of this, Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon's face was full of anger. The white-clothed woman looked at Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon and asked, "Were all the resources snatched away by Qin Feiyang?" "That's right. Qin Feiyang's actions were too fast, and there was Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor blocking us. When we entered the Northern Dragon God Palace, other than these 300,000 people, there was nothing else." Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon said angrily. "The same goes for the Western Dragon God Palace." The white-clothed woman shook her head and sighed. She looked up at Long Zun and said, "Lord, when we arrived at the Western Dragon God Palace, there were only a few 100,000 people left." "What about the East and South?" Long Zun asked. Although the resources of the Eastern Dragon God Palace were also plundered by Qin Feiyang's men, the people left behind were not bad, more than 800,000 people. Blood Dragon Ancestral Dragon said. The resources of the Southern Dragon God Palace were also all gone. As for the disciples of the Dragon God Palace, there were more than 500,000 people. Golden Dragon Ancestral Dragon said. "These bastards, their movements are too fast." Long Zun was furious. He thought that he could more or less get back some resources, but he didn't expect that he couldn't even get back a single herb. It's all the Dragon Slayer Palace's fault. If they hadn't intercepted us halfway, we would have had a chance to get back some resources. Silver Dragon Ancestral Dragon roared. Phew. Long Zun took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Then how many people did we bring back from the 4 Dragon God Palaces?" "We've counted." The disciples of the 4 Dragon God Palaces added up to about 2 million people. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon respectfully replied. "The 4 Dragon God Palaces have more than 100 million disciples, but now only 2 million people are left?" Long Zun said angrily. "Yes." Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon nodded. "Bastard. These humans deserve to die." Killing intent surged in Long Zun's eyes. The 10 great ancestral dragons looked at each other, their eyes full of helplessness. "Lord Long Zun, although there are only 2 million people left, their loyalty to us dragons is beyond doubt. If we can train them well, they will be a very terrifying force." Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon said. "That's true. To be able to choose to stay at a time like this, they must be absolutely loyal to our dragon clan. It's no exaggeration to say that they are more reliable than Li Chang and the other powerful humans." The woman in white nodded. "Then focus on training them. Of course, signing a destiny contract is also necessary. You guys can handle this matter yourselves?" Long Zun said. "Yes." The 10 great ancestral dragons nodded respectfully. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon asked, "Lord, what about the people we sent out?" "Those who went to the east were all killed by Qin Feiyang's men. It was that 5-clawed golden dragon. As for the people in the south and west, I erased their souls, so only Li Chang and the others who went to the north came back alive." Long Zun said. "Killed them all?" Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon was stunned. Long Zun said angrily, "Not killing them and letting Qin Feiyang take advantage of them?" Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon shrunk his neck. "I now know Qin Feiyang's intention. He wants to seal off Divine Dragon Island and imprison us dragons on this island." Long Zun said. "Imprison us?" The 10 great ancestral dragons were shocked. "That's right. There are 2 heaven-defying artifacts in each of the north, south, east, and west. If this isn't to imprison us, then what is it for? If it weren't for the sovereign divine weapon, I'm afraid they would have already killed their way into Divine Dragon Island." Long Zun snorted coldly. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon said resentfully, "This little bastard is quite ambitious. He actually wants to take away the rule of the ancient world from our hands. His plan is very good, but he neglected one point. My Dragon God Palace now has the time rule of 500 years in a day. As long as I have enough time, when I step into the half-step sovereign realm, I will be able to fight against the heaven-defying artifacts. By then it will be the time for us dragons to fight back." Long Zun sneered. "That's right. Although I don't know how he left the Nether King's Hell, after leaving the Nether King's Hell, he won't be able to cultivate in the ancient city. In this way his cultivation speed will be greatly reduced." Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon nodded. "So all of you have to hurry up and cultivate. Strive to step into the great undead realm before I break through. By then, with me restraining the heaven-defying artifacts, all of you will be able to easily kill Qin Badian and the others." Long Zun said. "Yes." The 10 great ancestral dragons replied respectfully. Long Zun waved his hand and said, "Then go and make arrangements for the disciples of the Dragon God Palace." "Yes." The 10 of them nodded respectfully and turned to leave the palace. Qin Feiyang, Qin Badian, do you think you have already won? Just you wait. When I break through to the half-step dominator realm, it will be your doomsday. Long Zun looked at the night sky outside the palace and his eyes flashed with cold murderous intent. In the sky above a mountain, the 10 great ancestral dragons stood side by side. Swoosh. As the black dragon ancestral dragon, the white-robed lady, the blood dragon ancestral dragon, and the golden dragon ancestral dragon waved their hands, countless people appeared in the void before them. These people were the disciples that they had brought back from the 4 dragon god palaces. Qin Feiyang was among them. As soon as everyone appeared, they immediately scanned their surroundings. What entered their sight was an endless stretch of mountains, rivers, and land. Although the Divine Dragon Island was just an island, even the Undead Realm experts were unable to see the entire Divine Dragon Island. One could imagine. How big was the Divine Dragon Island? In the mountains there were clouds and mist lingering around. Rivers extended in all directions. The grass and trees were green and it was like a fairyland. The spirit vein and crystal vein energy here is indeed more terrifying than the Dragon God Palace. Yeah. Unbelievable. How many spirit veins and crystal veins are there underground? Look at the top of the mountain. Those are definitely rare herbs in the world. The 2 million disciples scanned their surroundings, their eyes filled with shock. Not to mention these people, even Qin Feiyang was quite surprised. The spirit vein energy of the spirit vein and crystal vein energy of the Divine Dragon Island was not even 1/10 of the Devil's Land. One had to know. The Devil's Land had long been comparable to the Dragon God Palace. Now it had far surpassed the Dragon God Palace. Even so, it was not even 1/10 of the Divine Dragon Island. It was really unbelievable. The most shocking thing was that precious herbs could be seen everywhere in the mountains below. In just half a mile he found all kinds of elixirs that could open the door to potential, as well as herbs that could increase cultivation. For example, the Tree of Fortune and the Tree of Divine Infant. Their thick trunks could not be surrounded by dozens of people holding hands. There were thousands of fruits on them. This was simply a treasure trove. It was much better than the Black Tortoise Realm. Chapter 2844. If he wiped out the Divine Dragon Island as well. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang's heart couldn't help but burn. The resources of the Divine Dragon Island and the 4 great Dragon God Halls were equivalent to 2/3 of the Divine Continent's resources. At that time, how much would the Black Tortoise Realm grow? It was hard to imagine. Just as Qin Feiyang was lost in his thoughts, the Black Dragon Ancestral Gragon said, "As you can see, this is the Divine Dragon Island. Lord Ancestral Gragon, can we really cultivate here?" Someone immediately asked, his eyes filled with apprehension. This place was too tempting. The dragons brought them here. It felt like a dream. Of course. And the Dragon Sovereign personally instructed me to focus on training you guys. The Black Dragon Ancestral Gragon laughed. Focus on training us? Everyone was stunned. That's right. We dragons don't need any talent, we only need loyalty. We dragons also have this confidence. As long as you are loyal to us dragons, even if you don't have talent, we dragons can still nurture you into a supreme expert. The Black Dragon Ancestral Gragon said proudly. We will pledge our lives to the dragons. 2 million people knelt down and swore. Qin Feiyang also lowered his head and squatted in the crowd. Now was not the time to be impulsive. If he didn't lower his head, he would attract the attention of the dragons. No. He needed to keep a low profile and try not to attract attention so that he could find Yixue, and the other 2. Very good. The great Ancestral Gragon looked at the attitude of the group and were very satisfied. The Black Dragon Ancestral Gragon waved his hand and a crystal appeared. Qin Feiyang raised his head to look and his eyes flashed. It was a divine stone of fate. You know what to do. The Black Dragon Ancestral Gragon said indifferently. Yes. Everyone stood up and nodded. Then they all cut their fingers and drops of blood appeared. At this moment, the 10 great Ancestral Gragon were extremely cautious. They released their spirit sense and carefully looked at everyone, because they were worried that someone would take advantage of the chaos and not bleed. However, what they were worried about did not happen. 2 million people had cut their fingers. Qin Feiyang naturally had some too. At this time he couldn't play any tricks. As for this destiny contract, of course he wasn't afraid. The enslavement seal could be removed at any time. Ancestral Dragon Black Dragon waved his hand, and all the blood turned into a river of blood that surged into the sky and into the divine stone of fate. Very soon, the fate contract was completed. Li Chang, you will be in charge of arranging their cave residences. Remember, give them the best resources. The black dragon ancestral dragon put away the divine stone of fate and looked down at the mountains below. Yes. Li Chang flew out of the cave and stood in front of the black dragon ancestor dragon, nodding respectfully. Don't make things difficult for them. Also, your reaction when you encountered Qin Badian in the north made Lord Dragon Sovereign very displeased. Ancestral dragon black dragon said. This lowly one knows his mistake. Li Chang's expression changed as he hurriedly knelt in front of the black dragon ancestor dragon. We don't mean to blame you. But you'd better learn your lesson. You should know Lord Dragon Sovereign's temper. Even if we are ancestral dragons, if we dare to rebel, he will not hesitate to kill us. Ancestral Gragon said meaningfully. Thank you, sir, for your mercy. This lowly one will definitely remember. In the future, I swear to be loyal to you and will never betray you. Li Chang bowed his head and said. All right. Remember what you said today. Ancestral Dragon Black Dragon glanced at him indifferently, then looked at Qin Feiyang and the others and said with a smile, Divine Dragon Island has a time array that lasts 500 years a day, work hard. After saying that, the 10 great ancestral dragons dispersed and returned to their respective clans. A time array that lasts 500 years a day? It can't be. Divine Dragon Island's time array is actually so powerful? After the 10 great ancestral dragons disappeared, more than 2 million people were in an uproar. Everyone's face was filled with shock. Not only did they have endless resources, but they also had a time array that lasts 500 years a day. This was simply heaven. Brother, are you excited? A young man beside Qin Feiyang grabbed Qin Feiyang's shoulder and asked. Yes. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and nodded to the young man. But he didn't mind. What was there to be excited about? A mere 500 years a day couldn't be compared to the time array of the ancient castle in the Black Tortoise realm. Of course. For these people, it was indeed something to be excited about. Because these people in front of them, not to mention a time array that lasts 500 years a day, they had probably never even seen a time array that lasts 10 years a day. Li Chang did not open his mouth to urge them, and stood at the side quietly looking at everyone. Qin Feiyang glanced at Li Chang, his eyes shining. Li Chang. This name, when he was communicating with the ancestor had mentioned it before. He had a cultivation base of the initial imperishable realm, and his strength was quite impressive. Moreover, judging from the warning that ancestral dragon Black Dragon gave Li Chang should have fallen into the hands of the ancestor, and might even have the heart to rebel at that time. In other words, this Li Chang was actually not willing to work for the dragons. Otherwise, why would he have the heart to rebel? Therefore, this Li Chang could be used as a starting point. He knew nothing about Divine Dragon Island. He had no idea where Cloud Supreme Yi Shui or an old man Yi were. And in order to find out about this, he had to find a suitable person. From Qin Feiyang's point of view, this Li Chang should be the entry point. However, he couldn't be too direct. After all, Li Chang would definitely be afraid after being warned by Ancestral Dragon Black Dragon. At that time, if he were to overreach himself and expose his identity, the gains would not make up for the losses. So, this matter had to be done slowly and observed first. After a while, everyone finally calmed down and the place became much quieter. Have you all calmed down? Li Chang finally spoke. Greetings, Lord. Only then did everyone realize that they had neglected Li Chang, and hurriedly bowed. And Li Chang nodded his head, glanced at the group of people and said, Since you've all calmed down, then follow me. After saying that, Li Chang flew down and everyone immediately followed him. Entering the mountains below, everyone could clearly see that whether it was the surrounding giant peaks or the mountain ridges, there were countless cave dwellings of all sizes. This place has no special name. We call it the Cultivation Ground. In the past, there were about 1,000 people in this cultivation ground. And now, it's fine if I don't say it. In short, they are the same as me humans. Moreover, their cultivation bases are at least at the half-step Undying Realm. Among them, there are many initial and initial stage Undying Realm experts. So normally if you have nothing to do, don't make a fuss here, lest you disturb everyone's meditation. As for the cave dwellings, there are many here. You can pick one. Li Chang looked at the group of people and said, So many Undying Realm experts? More than 2 million people were once again in an uproar. In the past, it was difficult to even see a single Undying Realm expert outside, but on Divine Dragon Island, there were more than 1,000 Undying Realm experts. If the Undying Realm experts of the dragons were included, how terrifying would the number be? Chapter 28:45. In the past, Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. What Li Chang said was that there used to be more than 1,000 undead realm experts here. What about now? This time Long Zun sent out 1,000 undead realm experts. How many came back? From Li Chang's tone, it seemed that they had lost a lot. Alright, that's it. You guys make your own arrangements. After Li Chang finished speaking, he was ready to leave. Lord Li, what about the resources? Yeah. Cultivation requires soul stones, right? Where are we going to get them? There are also divine arts and divine weapons. Lord Ancestral Dragon just said that he would give us the best resources. Someone hurriedly asked. Giving you the best resources doesn't mean giving you divine arts and divine weapons. If you are equipped with everything, what's the difference between you and the flowers in the greenhouse? Li Chang raised his eyebrows. But Lord Ancestral Dragon said so. Someone was not convinced and used Ancestral Dragon to suppress Li Chang. Lord Ancestral Dragon said so, but the resources do not include divine arts and divine weapons. If you want it, you have to rely on your own abilities. As for soul stones, we weren't prepared for the sudden arrival of so many people. Let me ask Lord Wang Chang first. Li Chang said. Wang Chang? Everyone was stunned and asked suspiciously, who is Lord Wang Chang? Li Chang said in admiration. He is the strongest of our human race and also the strongest of this cultivation place. Great achievement, Undead Realm. Great achievement, Undead Realm. Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted. He thought that among the dragons Yi Zhong was the only great achievement Undead Realm expert, but he did not expect there to be another one. The foundation of the dragons was indeed unfathomable. The others were also shocked. They never expected that there would be such a terrifying existence in this cultivation place. You guys find a cave to settle down first. After I discuss with Lord Wang Chang, I will inform you. After Li Chang finished speaking, he rose into the air and flew towards the highest peak not far away. Qin Feiyang followed his gaze. On the peak of the mountain he could vaguely see a very ordinary straw hut. However, he did not sense anyone's aura on the mountain peak. Presumably, this Lord Wang Chang was a very low-profile person and did not release the slightest bit of aura. Since we're already here, let's take things as they come. Don't think too much about it. Hurry up and pick a cave abode. Let's settle down first. A slender purple-clothed youth turned around to look at everyone and smiled warmly. This person had the cultivation of the Nine Heavens realm perfection, and he looked a little harmless. However, would a truly kind human choose to be the dragon's lackeys? Definitely not. Because once they chose to follow the dragons, they would become the enemy of mankind. Therefore, this purple-clothed youth was not as simple as he seemed on the surface. This person was definitely someone who was two-faced and had a dark heart. Qin Feiyang glanced at the purple-clothed youth and silently remembered this person. Everyone began to choose their cave abodes. There was nothing to be picky about. This was because all cave dwellings, crystal veins and spirit veins had the same energy. However, there was one thing that was unavoidable. A contest. No matter where it was, there would always be competition between people. This might be the nature of humans always wanting to be superior to others. Therefore, in the eyes of some people, the higher one stood, the higher one's status would be. Therefore, those who were more competitive would choose a cave abode that was in a higher position. Just like that purple-clothed youth. He chose a cave abode at the top of a giant mountain next to him. Standing at the entrance of the cave abode, he even turned around and looked down at Qin Feiyang and the others. Not only was there a trace of disdain in his eyes, but there was also a natural arrogance. How arrogant! A black-clothed youth beside Qin Feiyang muttered in a low voice. Oh? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and could not help but turn to look at the black-clothed youth. Brother, why did you enter the Divine Dragon Island? The black-clothed youth also noticed Qin Feiyang's gaze and turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked. What about you? Qin Feiyang asked. Me? The black-clothed youth was stunned and said in a low voice, of course it's for cultivation resources. In that case you follow the dragons but you don't really want to serve the dragons? Qin Feiyang frowned. The black-clothed youth hurriedly made a shushing gesture and carefully glanced at the people around him. Seeing that no one had noticed, he heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately after, the black-clothed youth looked at Qin Feiyang and said discontentedly, Brother, do you want to kill me? How can you say that? Qin Feiyang smiled and did not speak again. The black-clothed youth said unhappily, You haven't answered me yet. When I came to the Divine Dragon Island, I naturally followed the dragons and pledged my loyalty to the dragons, because the dragons have always been my faith. Qin Feiyang said these words that went against his heart without blushing or skipping a beat. Faith? The black-clothed youth was surprised and shook his head, Although we are all followers of the dragons, I'm afraid you're the first person to treat the dragons as faith. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The black-clothed youth looked deeply at Qin Feiyang and reached out his hand. I am a disciple of the Southern Dragon God Palace, Li Xiaofei. I hope brother will take care of me in the future. Qin Feiyang did not want to pay attention to this person. But this person seemed to be naturally familiar with him. Qin Feiyang thought for a moment, then reached out his hand and shook hands with Li Xiaofei and smiled. I am from the Northern Dragon God Palace called Wang Xiao Air. Both of our names have the word, Xiao. It seems that we are really fated. Li Xiaofei smiled in surprise. Indeed. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Xiaofei said, then brother Wang, we are friends from now on. If there are any benefits, don't forget me. Friends? Qin Feiyang murmured and waved his hand. Not at all, I will have to trouble brother Li to take care of me in the future. Brother Wang, you must be joking. With my cultivation, I am not qualified to take care of you. Li Xiaofei shook his head. Qin Feiyang began to size up Li Xiaofei's cultivation after hearing this. His cultivation was not weak. Peak 9 Heaven's Realm. Brother Li, you must be joking. Qin Feiyang shook his head with a wry smile. A Peak 9 Heaven's Realm cultivator needed his care? Do you think a serious person like me would joke? To be honest, brother Wang, I can feel that although our cultivation is the same, your strength is definitely stronger than mine. Li Xiaofei laughed in a low voice. Is that so? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He could even feel that? Did he really think he was a 3-year-old child that could be easily fooled? Of course. My sixth sense is very accurate. Li Xiaofei nodded with a serious expression. Qin Feiyang glanced at Li Xiaofei, then looked at the purple-clothed young man and asked in a low voice, is he strong? Not bad. But not as strong as you and me. Li Xiaofei glanced at the purple-clothed young man and said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed, cupping his hands, sorry to disturb you. After saying that, he walked towards a mountain ridge on his left without looking back. This Li Xiaofei was simply a fraud. It was better to stay away from such a person. Brother Wang, what do you mean? Li Xiaofei caught up and frowned. You don't think I am fooling you, do you? No. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. With your attitude you still dare to say no? Li Xiaofei was dissatisfied. Brother, I am very busy. Can you stop bothering me? Qin Feiyang was helpless. Li Xiaofei shook his head and sighed. I wanted to be friends with you sincerely, but you think I am crazy. How sad. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. What kind of person was this? They didn't seem to be familiar with each other. Ignoring Li Xiaofei, Qin Feiyang passed through the forest and finally arrived at the mountain ridge. The mountain ridge was more than 100 feet high, like a giant python winding up and down. On the mountain, there were hundreds of cave residences of various sizes. But here he couldn't even sense a single aura. It was quiet all around. Qin Feiyang glanced at the mountain ridge, then walked toward the cave residence at the bottom. Brother Wang, I am right next to you. Call me if you need anything. Li Xiaofei rolled his eyes and ran to a cave residence next to Qin Feiyang, grinning at Qin Feiyang. Okay. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and strode into the cave residence. Inside the cave residence, about 100 feet, the ground and walls were inlaid with a kind of black stone slab. Other than that, there were no other decorations. It looked very simple. However, for Qin Feiyang, this cave residence didn't mean much. Because even if he was cultivating, he would go to the castle to cultivate. This cave abode was nothing more than a place to deceive others. At the entrance of the cave residence, there was a black stone door. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the stone door immediately closed. The entire cave residence immediately fell into darkness. Subsequently, he leaned against the wall and lowered his head to ponder. Although he had successfully sneaked into the Divine Dragon Island, how could he inquire about Yi Xue and the other two? One had to know. This was the Divine Dragon Island, the headquarters of the dragons. Everything must be under the control of the dragons. Moreover, although there were 2 million people who entered the Divine Dragon Island this time, almost no one knew that the Chief Pavilion Master, Yi Xue, and Old Master Yi were on the Divine Dragon Island. So, once he asked someone to inquire about it, it would definitely arouse suspicion. And if he slowly searched alone, the Divine Dragon Island was so big, how long would it take to find them? He didn't have time to waste like this. After all, he still had to plan how to escape the Divine Dragon Island. Headache. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. Although he had sneaked in, he was at his wit's end. Suddenly, he thought of Yi Zhong and immediately sent a voice transmission. Master, you are more familiar with the Divine Dragon Island and know about Long Zun. Can you guess where Long Zun might have locked them up? The most likely place is the divine prison. But that's not necessarily the case. We have to investigate before we know. Yi Zhong's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Divine prison? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. But this divine prison is located below the sacred mountain of the dragons. There are supreme experts guarding it, and Long Zun has personally set up a barrier. It's almost impossible to sneak in. Yi Zhong said. Divine prison, Qin Feiyang muttered. It would definitely not work if he asked his master to do it now. After all, in the eyes of the dragons, his master had already fallen. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang thought of Li Chang again. This person might really be able to make an entry point. Chapter 2846. Then how much does master know about Li Chang? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. Li Chang? Yi Zhong pondered for a while and said, this old man has watched this person grow up. Qin Feiyang said, so, master must know him very well? Sort of. The reason this person entered the Dragon God Palace back then was to take revenge. Yi Zhong said. Revenge? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. Back then, his family was considered a rich and powerful family in the north. But because of some personal grudges, his family was exterminated, and he was the only one who survived. You should be able to imagine the feeling of being exterminated. And the people who exterminated his family didn't let him go. They have been chasing him. Forced to enter the Dragon God Palace, he chose to enter it. This person's talent is not bad. Relying on the resources of the Dragon God Palace, he smoothly stepped into the half-step invincible realm. You should be able to imagine what happened later without this old man saying. He went to take revenge, and then this old man brought him to Divine Dragon Island. Because of the 4 Dragon God Palaces, anyone who breaks through to the half-step invincible realm has to enter Divine Dragon Island. Yi Zhong transmitted. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization and asked, so, he entered the Dragon God Palace because he had no other choice. That's right. In fact, when he broke through to the half-step invincible realm, this old man had already seen that he didn't want to enter Divine Dragon Island. He even wanted to leave the Dragon God Palace. But he also knew that the dragons wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. After all, he could have such achievements because of the dragon's nurturing. Moreover, the divine stone of fate controlled his divine soul. He didn't dare to resist. Yi Zhong said. In other words, he entered Divine Dragon Island because he was forced to? Qin Feiyang asked. Yes. Yi Zhong responded. The corners of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted slightly as he secretly laughed. Then it seems that we can indeed start from him. I won't object to you doing this, but you must ensure his safety. After all, his life has already been very difficult. Yi Zhong said. I will. Qin Feiyang replied. Furthermore, on Divine Dragon Island, unless there is no other choice, do not enter the ancient castle or the Black Tortoise world. Yi Zhong reminded. What? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. You don't know Long Zun's ability? As long as any spatial divine item is exposed, it will not be able to escape her eyes. Yi Zhong said. I know that. But this ability of hers needs to be seen with the naked eye. She's not in a cultivation place right now, so she shouldn't need to be so careful. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Yi Zhong said, then how do you know that she's not hiding in the dark and watching you guys? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. No one knew if Long Zun was spying on them in the dark? In short, it's better to be careful. Yi Zhong said. Okay. Qin Feiyang replied and transmitted his voice. Then where did Yi Shui and old master Yi live in the past? Wait a moment, I'll draw a map of Divine Dragon Island for you so that it'll be convenient for you to act in the future. Yi Zhong secretly said. Map. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned, and his heart was immediately overjoyed. With a map, it would indeed be much more convenient. A moment later, Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and a map immediately appeared in the void in front of him. Qin Feiyang lowered his head to check. On the map, the entire Divine Dragon Island was lifelike, as if it was a copy of Divine Dragon Island. In other words, this was a map of the entire Divine Dragon Island. I've specially marked the more important places on Divine Dragon Island, and there's an explanation below. Take a closer look. Destroy it after you're done. Yi Zhong said. Thank you, master. Qin Feiyang secretly thanked him, then sat cross-legged on the ground and carefully looked at it. The entire Divine Dragon Island was like a huge divine dragon, lying in the middle of the inland sea. And Divine Dragon Island was divided into 2 areas. Outer area, inner area. The outer area was the home of the dragon's various races. There were a total of 10 dragons, which meant that there were different races. That is, the Fire Dragon Clan, the Golden Dragon Clan, the White Dragon Clan, the Blood Dragon Clan, and so on. The 10 races were scattered in various places in the outer area, surrounding the inner area. And the inner area was where Long Zun was. Right now, Qin Feiyang's cultivation place was also in the inner area. And it was not far from the Dragon Palace. With Qin Feiyang's speed, it would take at most half an hour. And the Dragon Palace was Long Zun's bedroom. That was to say, this cultivation place was right under Long Zun's nose. To Qin Feiyang this was not good news at all. Because his cultivation was only at the 9th heaven realm, he needed half an hour to rush from the cultivation place to the Dragon Palace. But with Long Zun's cultivation, if he wanted to come to the cultivation place, it would only take a few blinks of an eye. So, in the future he could not be careless in the cultivation place because Long Zun could come at any time. And he could not make too much of a commotion. After all, at this distance, if there was any commotion, Long Zun would be alerted immediately. And in the inner area, other than the Dragon Palace and the cultivation place, the most important place was the Sacred Land. No, the Sacred Land was more important than the Dragon Palace on Divine Dragon Island. The Dragon's Sacred Land was located in the center of the entire Divine Dragon Island. And the Sacred Mountain, where the Sovereign Divine Weapon was located, was at the center of the Sacred Land. In short, the layout of Divine Dragon Island was divided into 2 major areas. The outer area had 10 major clans. The inner area had the cultivation place, the Dragon Palace, the Sacred Mountain, and the Sacred Mountain. As for the divine prison that Yi Zhong spoke of, it was located beneath the Sacred Mountain. To be honest, entering the divine prison was harder than ascending to the heavens. First of all, the Sacred Mountain had the Sovereign Divine Weapon. Think about it. Could you sneak into the divine prison under the nose of the Sovereign Divine Weapon? It was definitely impossible. Secondly, the Sacred Mountain had supreme experts. Therefore, the plan to sneak into the divine prison could be announced as impossible. Qin Feiyang looked at a particularly eye-catching mark on the map. This place was only half an hour away from the Dragon Palace. And this was the courtyard where Yi Shui, and Old Master Yi used to live. But there was a big problem here. Because the place where Yi Shui, and Old Master Yi lived was in the opposite direction of the cultivation place. For example, the Dragon Palace was placed in the center, the cultivation place was on the left, and the place where Yi Shui, lived was on the right. The 3 places were connected in a straight line. In other words, if he wanted to go to the place where Yi Shui, lived, he had to go through the Dragon Palace without taking a detour. Going through the Dragon Palace? That was absolutely impossible. Because it was too risky. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and sent a voice transmission. Master, what is Longzuan's cultivation level? Perfection imperishable realm. Yi Zhong said in a deep voice. So strong? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up, his face full of shock. And according to what I know, she has already started to break through to the half-step sovereign realm. Yi Zhong said again. Half-step sovereign realm? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Half-step sovereign realm is the realm above the imperishable realm. At this realm, her strength is comparable to a fully awakened heaven-defying divine weapon. Yi Zhong said. What? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Half-step sovereign realm was comparable to a fully awakened heaven-defying divine weapon. If Longzuan really stepped into the half-step sovereign realm, wouldn't they be in danger? Don't be nervous. It's not that easy to break through to the sovereign realm. Yi Zhong comforted. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. The sovereign realm has nothing to do with divine power. Because the sovereign realm requires comprehension of the power of law. Yi Zhong said. Comprehension of the power of law? Qin Feiyang was even more puzzled. You should know that there are differences in comprehension of the power of law, right? Yi Zhong asked. I know this. It seems to be 6 stages. Beginner, initial, small success, large success, perfection, great perfection. Qin Feiyang said. He definitely didn't know this himself. He only heard it from Madman. That's right. The power of law has a total of 6 stages. And if you want to step into the sovereign realm, you have to reach the 6th stage, which is perfection of the power of law. Yi Zhong said. Perfection of the power of law? Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly said, Perfection of the power of law, doesn't it mean that you have completely grasped the power of law? Yes. Yi Zhong said. That is to say, after completely comprehending a power of law, you can step into the sovereign realm? Qin Feiyang said. It's like this. Yi Zhong nodded. So stepping into the sovereign realm is related to the power of law. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization and asked, What if you don't comprehend the power of law? If you don't comprehend the power of law, you can forget about stepping into the sovereign realm forever. Yi Zhong said. I see. Qin Feiyang muttered. Sigh, not to mention those who don't comprehend the power of law, even those like us who have comprehended the power of law may not be able to step into the sovereign realm forever. Because the profound meaning of the power of law is too difficult. Just like this old man. I have comprehended the law of fire for so many years, but until now, I have been stuck at the second stage. If I don't have any fortuitous encounters such as the guidance of an expert or the inheritance of a certain expert, this old man is afraid that I can only stay at the second stage for the rest of my life. Yi Zhong sighed. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. Even with Master's temperament facing the power of law, he was actually so desperate? It seemed that to completely comprehend a power of law was more difficult than he imagined. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and asked, Master, what if a person has two types of power of law? It's the same. As long as you completely comprehend one of the power of law, you can step into the sovereign realm. However, a person who has two types of power of law, is there such a person in this world? Yi Zhong said. There is. Qin Feiyang secretly smiled. Oh, why don't this old man know? Yi Zhong was shocked and quickly asked. It's your disciple me? Qin Feiyang chuckled. You. Yi Zhong was stunned for a moment in the ancient castle and then said, How is that possible? Didn't you comprehend the power of law of light? Would this disciple lie to you? Before returning to the ancient world, I made a trip back to the great Qin and by chance, comprehended the law of cause and effect. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. What? You actually comprehended the law of cause and effect. Yi Zhong's body that was formed by his god soul suddenly trembled, his eyes filled with disbelief. Chapter 2847. Yes. If you don't believe me, you can ask Yi Cheng. Qin Feiyang secretly said. This old man doesn't doubt it. But, this is really unbelievable. A person can actually comprehend two types of law. This is the first time this old man has heard of such a thing. What's more terrifying is that it's actually the law of cause and effect. Yi Zhong said. Is the law of cause and effect very strong? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Although he comprehended the law of cause and effect, he wasn't very clear about the specifics. You should know that there are strong and weak law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is the strongest law of cause and effect in this world. Of course, it's just one of them. As far as this old man knows, since ancient times, no one has ever comprehended the law of cause and effect. Yi Zhong said. So strong? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Very powerful. Kid, you're really lucky. Yi Zhong said enviously. You flatter me, I'm just lucky. Qin Feiyang chuckled, but the joy and pride in his words couldn't be concealed. Lucky? Yi Zhong shook his head. Although comprehending the law of cause and effect was indeed related to luck, the most important thing was still one's own conditions. Qin Feiyang could comprehend two types of law of cause and effect was one of the strongest law of cause and effect. One could say that this child was already the number one person in the world. As Yi Cheng said, this disciple was indeed worthy of being proud of. Master, how much else do you know about the law of cause and effect? Tell me all of it. Qin Feiyang said with a face full of curiosity. Actually, this old man doesn't know much. I just occasionally heard about it from Long Zun. If you want to know, you have to ask Long Zun. Yi Zhong said. Ask Long Zun? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and smiled bitterly. Forget it then. This disciple still wants to live for a few more years. Actually, there's no need for you to inquire so much right now. Focus on comprehending these two types of laws first. As long as you comprehend it, you will be able to step into the sovereign realm. Once you step into the sovereign realm, you will be able to go to a bigger world and see more experts. At that time, you will naturally understand everything that you don't know. Yi Zhong said. That makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded and said inwardly, Thank you, Master, for your teachings. Yi Zhong shook his head and smiled bitterly. I'm really ashamed. Whether it's talent or intelligence, you're better than this old man. This old man can't teach you anything at all. Of course. For example, I need your advice on how to deal with things and so on. Qin Feiyang said. I guess this is all I can teach you. Yi Zhong shook his head. Can you not be so modest? If you don't have any standards, why would the two ancestors value you so much? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Yi Zhong couldn't help but laugh. All right then, you continue to reconstruct your divine soul and physical body. I'll think of a way to go to the place where Yi Shui'er and the others are staying. Qin Feiyang said. Be careful then. Yi Zhong reminded. And Qin Feiyang nodded and asked with a stunned expression, Master, can the altar be opened on Divine Dragon Island? No. Yi Zhong said. How troublesome. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. If he couldn't open the altar, he had to sneak over step by step. Who knew what would happen along the way? But if he could open the altar, as long as he knew the coordinates, he could immediately run over without anyone noticing. All right then. I won't disturb you any further. I have to think about it. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he looked at the map again and pondered. Time passed bit by bit. Outside, dawn arrived. The sun rose slowly. Under the reflection of the morning sun, Divine Dragon Island became even more magnificent. Everyone come out. Suddenly, Li Chang shouted. Inside the cave. Qin Feiyang was stunned and a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. He got up and waved his hand to destroy the map. Then he opened the door of the cave and strode out. Everything on the map had been imprinted in his mind, so there was no need for it. Morning. Li Xiaofei also happened to walk out of the cave. Looking at Qin Feiyang, he waved his hand naturally and smiled. Morning. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Li Xiaofei walked up and put his arm around Qin Feiyang's shoulder. Qin Feiyang didn't expect this person to be so casual and instinctively resisted. But on second thought, perhaps it was easier to hide one's identity with someone around. Because sometimes, if one was too arrogant, it would be easier to attract the attention of others. Li Xiaofei said, Brother Wang, believe me, I'm really not a fraud. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He almost forgot about it, but he didn't expect this person to still remember it. It's true. My sixth sense has never been wrong. Li Xiaofei patted his chest and made a solemn vow. Good. I believe you, I believe you. Qin Feiyang nodded helplessly. If he didn't believe him, he was afraid this person wouldn't stop. Do you really believe me? Li Xiaofei looked at him doubtfully. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Xiaofei suddenly smiled, turned his head and glanced at the mountain behind and said, It seems that there are only two of us here? Isn't this good? Qin Feiyang smiled. It's too quiet and boring. Li Xiaofei pursed his lips and then asked, Why don't we move to a crowded place? Not interested. I'm here to cultivate, not to join in the fun. Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's true. Li Xiaofei nodded and said with a smile, Then, let's rely on each other here. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded with a wry smile. With such a scammer by his side, he really wouldn't be bored in the future. So, the two of them walked to the central area of the cultivation ground, where a dense crowd of people had already gathered. Li Chang stood in the air. After discussing with Lord Wang Chang and consulting with Lord Long Zun, we have decided to set up a Deacon's Hall here. It's the same as the Deacon's Hall in the Dragon God Palace, responsible for distributing resources and other matters. Li Chang said expressionlessly. Then when can we receive the resources? Everyone didn't care about the Deacon's Hall at all as long as they got the resources. Li Chang glanced at the mountains and rivers below, and suddenly locked onto a giant mountain not far away. Following that, Li Chang took a step forward and landed on the peak of the mountain. Then he used his great mana and quickly built a black hall on the peak of the mountain. Following that, Li Chang walked into the hall and took out a desk and a chair. You can come up now. Don't worry, 2 million people. It will take a long time to distribute resources. Come one by one. Those who are not in a hurry can go back to the cave first and come back later. When Li Chang's voice came out from the hall, many people couldn't wait to fly towards the peak of the mountain. Brother Wang, let's go too. Li Xiaofei pulled Qin Feiyang and ran towards the peak of the mountain. Lord Li Chang won't swallow your resources, what's the hurry? Qin Feiyang was speechless and stopped in the air. Aren't you curious how many soul stones the dragons will give us? Li Xiaofei asked. What's there to be curious about? We'll know in the end anyway. Qin Feiyang shook his head. You're too calm. All right. I'll go up first. When I get the resources, I'll come back to you. After Li Xiaofei finished speaking, he rushed to the peak of the mountain with the others. Just for these resources, is it worth it to follow the dragons and sell your self-esteem? Qin Feiyang sighed secretly. To be honest, no matter how many soul stones they gave, he didn't care. First of all, he didn't lack soul stones at all. Secondly, he didn't need the dragons as charity. Or he could just rob them. That would be satisfying. Without staying any longer, Qin Feiyang returned to the cave. After pondering for a while, he finally gritted his teeth and activated the concealment technique. According to the map in his memory, he rushed in the direction of the Dragon Palace. Of course, he couldn't go directly to the Dragon Palace, but he was going to bypass the Dragon Palace. It took half an hour to go from the cultivation place to the Dragon Palace, and another half an hour to go from the Dragon Palace to the residence of Yi Shui, and Old Master Yi. In total, it was exactly 1 hour. If he took a detour, the time needed would naturally be extended. But now the concealment technique could be activated twice a day, and each time it could last for 2 hours. It was completely enough for a round trip. He was afraid that there would be an accident on the way. Chapter 28:48. Although it was his first time coming to Divine Dragon Island with the map drawn by Yi Zhong, Qin Feiyang was very familiar with every place. Not long after leaving the cultivation place, Qin Feiyang entered a vast mountain. There were plants, lakes and rivers in the mountain. But there was not a single beast. However, there were many small animals. For example, there were lively little rabbits, dancing white cranes and colorful birds. They made this Divine Dragon Island look like a fairyland. What's the situation? Qin Feiyang frowned. On such a big island, except for these small animals, why was there not even a single beast? Later, he couldn't help but be curious and asked Yi Zhong. It turned out that Divine Dragon Island prohibited beasts from entering. In other words, the entire Divine Dragon Island only had dragons and a small number of humans as well as these cute little animals. Even in the past, Divine Dragon Island didn't have these small animals. Later, Princess Dragons felt that this Divine Dragon Island was too deserted, so she went outside to catch some small animals and raised them on Divine Dragon Island. In short, except for dragons, any creature that wanted to step into the Dragon God Palace must first get the permission of Dragon Sovereign. The journey was smooth beyond imagination. After about half an hour, Qin Feiyang finally saw a courtyard. It's here. According to the map, Yi Shui, an old man Yi used to live here. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the courtyard and didn't rush in. He first carefully sensed. However, in the courtyard he didn't sense the aura of the two. Could it be that they are no longer here? Qin Feiyang secretly muttered and quietly entered the courtyard. He searched inside and out, but there was no one in the courtyard. How is it? Yi Cheng's voice rang in Qin Feiyang's mind. No one. Qin Feiyang secretly said. How could there be no one? Yi Cheng was surprised. Qin Feiyang remained silent. He turned around and entered a bedroom. There was no one in the bedroom and the bedding was neatly folded. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to leave, he suddenly noticed a jade pendant on a cabinet beside the bed. Qin Feiyang walked over suspiciously and grabbed the jade pendant on the cabinet. This jade pendant was about half the size of a baby's palm, and it was engraved with the pattern of a divine phoenix. There was also the word Yi in the middle. Yi Cheng, is this jade pendant Yi Shui's? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. What jade pendant? Yi Cheng was bewildered. Qin Feiyang described the shape of the jade pendant to Yi Cheng. Right. This is Shui's. Although it's just an ordinary piece of jade, it means a lot to Shui, because it was a gift from her parents when she was born. Ever since her parents died, she has been carrying this jade pendant with her. Yi Cheng said hurriedly. The jade pendant is here, but she's not. What's going on? Qin Feiyang frowned, turned around and walked out of the room. He left the courtyard and looked around, but he still didn't find Yi Shui and Old Master Yi. Feiyang, there's a cultivation room under the hall in the courtyard. Have you looked for it? Yi Zhong's voice sounded. Cultivation room? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He returned to the courtyard, entered the hall and scanned the floor. Yi Zhong said, this cultivation room is used by Shui, to cultivate. Quickly take a look and see if she's inside. How do I open the secret door? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. Do you see the vase in the left corner of the hall? Yi Zhong asked. Qin Feiyang turned around and saw a blue and white porcelain vase that was as tall as a person in the left corner of the hall. There's a vase. Qin Feiyang replied. Turn it gently. Yi Zhong said. Okay. Qin Feiyang stepped forward, held the vase and exerted a little force. As the vase turned, a crack appeared on the floor of the hall, and then it slowly opened. Not long after, a cultivation room of about 10 feet in size appeared in front of him. Qin Feiyang stood above and scanned the cultivation room below. There was nothing in the cultivation room except for a futon. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, Master, they're not in the cultivation room. Then where could they be? Yi Zhong was surprised. Could it be that they've been killed? Yi Cheng suddenly said. Impossible. Longzuan isn't such a heartless person. Yi Zhong said. Big brother, you're still protecting her at this point? Yi Cheng said angrily. Yi Zhong was silent. Yi Cheng, don't worry. I didn't find any bloodstains or traces of battle in this courtyard. I think they should be safe. Qin Feiyang comforted him. In fact, even he wasn't sure. Because there were no bloodstains or traces of battle here, it couldn't prove anything at all. After all, given Longzuan's strength, he could kill Yi Shui, and Yi Cheng without leaving any traces. Taking a step back. If the two of them were really safe, where would they be now? One had to know. This happened last night. In other words, only one night had passed. Tada. Just as Qin Feiyang was pondering, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside. Qin Feiyang immediately shivered and quickly closed the secret door. He calmed down and hid behind the vase. He was extremely nervous and there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Who would come here at this time? Very soon. The door was pushed open and a gust of fragrant wind blew into the hall. He saw a woman in white standing outside the door. Yi Shui. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. That's right. This woman was Yi Shui. But just as he was about to greet Yi Shui, he suddenly realized that there was a young man standing at the entrance of the courtyard. This young man was about 1.8 meters tall. He was wearing a white long robe and his face was like jade. He had an elegant demeanor. What a powerful aura. Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't see through this young man's cultivation at all. However, this person's aura contained a pure dragon power. Obviously, his real body was a divine dragon. And this young man obviously came with Yi Shui. Yi Shui stood at the door and glanced at the hall. Her eyes were extremely melancholic. She then strode into the hall and headed to the second floor. Qin Feiyang glanced at the young man outside the courtyard. Then he stealthily followed him. Very soon, Yi Shui entered the bedroom and glanced at the cabinet beside the bed. Yes. At that moment, she was stunned. Where was the jade pendant? She clearly remembered that she left it here before she left. Qin Feiyang saw Yi Shui's appearance and knew that she was here to get the jade pendant. And the jade pendant was now in his hands. Are you looking for this? Just as Yi Shui was confused, a voice suddenly rang in her mind. Immediately after, she saw the jade pendant appear in front of her out of thin air. Yi Shui was shocked. Don't make a sound. Qin Feiyang hurriedly transmitted his voice and then grabbed Yi Shui. Yi Shui immediately entered stealth mode. At the same time, she also saw Qin Feiyang. A trace of killing intent appeared in Yi Shui's eyes. Killing intent? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and quickly said, no matter what Long Zun said to you, please calm down. Yi Shui didn't make a sound and just stared at Qin Feiyang. Although Qin Feiyang used to get along with her as Li Bu, she also knew what Qin Feiyang looked like. After all, there were rumors about Qin Feiyang everywhere in the Divine Land these years. Moreover, back then she even saved Qin Feiyang. At that time, Qin Feiyang was in a coma. So at a glance, she had already recognized Qin Feiyang. Shui, what's wrong? Outside. The young man in white also keenly felt Yi Shui's killing intent and hurriedly asked loudly. Qin Feiyang's expression changed slightly, and he could even sense that the young man in white had already entered the courtyard. Your grandfather is not dead. Give me some time to explain. Qin Feiyang hurriedly transmitted his voice. Grandfather is not dead. Yi Shui's eyes suddenly trembled. Please believe me. Qin Feiyang said. Yi Shui took a deep look at Qin Feiyang and then said, I just thought of grandfather and second grandfather's death and couldn't control the killing intent in my heart. It's nothing, you don't have to come in, I want to be alone for a while. Alright then. The young man in white's voice sounded outside. Qin Feiyang walked to the window and saw the young man in white stop and sit at the stone table in the courtyard. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. What's going on? Yi Shui transmitted her voice. Seeing is believing, hearing is false. Qin Feiyang secretly smiled. With a thought, Yi Zhong and Yi Qing quietly appeared beside him. Grandfather, second grandfather, Yi Shui looked at the two of them and couldn't help but cry. Girl, it's been hard on you. Yi Zhong sighed and his eyes were full of self-blame. What's going on? Yi Shui looked at the two of them and asked. It's a long story, I'll tell you slowly when I have time. You just have to remember to listen to Qin Feiyang from now on. Yi Zhong transmitted his voice. Okay. Yi Shui nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Zhong and transmitted his voice to Yi Shui. What did Longzuan say to you after Master faked his death? Hearing this question, Yi Zhong looked at Yi Shui nervously and expectantly. Yi Shui tried to recall what had happened and briefly explained the situation to him. After hearing this, Yi Zhong's face turned pale. Yi Cheng looked at his elder brother and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He then looked at Yi Shui and transmitted his voice. Are you sure Longzuan said to take revenge on Qin Feiyang? Yes. Yi Shui nodded and said to herself, she also asked me and great-grandfather to go to the Dragon Palace and teach us cultivation personally. So you went to the Dragon Palace. Qin Feiyang came to a realization and secretly sneered, she asked you to go to the Dragon Palace not to teach you cultivation but to spy on you. Yi Shui couldn't help but panic when she heard this. She originally thought that Longzuan was doing it for her own good, but she didn't expect that she was just using her. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Yi Zhong and transmitted his voice, Master, now that the truth is in front of you, you should give up now. Yi Zhong lowered his head and didn't say a word. If one took a closer look, they would see a hint of disappointment and pain between his brows. Chapter 28:49. What's wrong? Yi Shui looked at the three of them suspiciously. She didn't know about the relationship between Yi Zhong and Longzuan, so she was puzzled when she saw Yi Zhong's disappointed face. Qin Feiyang said to himself, Yi Qing, accompany Master to the ancient castle. Okay. Yi Qing nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the two of them disappeared. It was obvious that Master had always had feelings for Longzuan. Although it was impossible for them to be together, at least he could always be by her side. For Master, he was already very satisfied to be able to protect her like this. But what he didn't expect was that after he faked his death, Longzuan wasn't sad at all. Instead, he used his death to make Yi Shui and old Master Yi become his chess pieces for revenge. How could Master not be heartbroken in the face of such ruthlessness? Perhaps Longzuan had been using Master's feelings for her all along to make Master work for her. So now Master must be feeling terrible. Qin Feiyang, Grandpa, what is he doing? Yi Shui was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, children shouldn't ask too much about adult matters. Yi Shui rolled her eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang. She asked, are you really Li Bu'er? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. You're really a bastard. Yi Shui cursed. Everyone in the Dragon God Palace was deceived by this guy. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly and said to himself, then your great-grandfather is in the Dragon Palace now? Yes. Yi Shui nodded. Then who is the person outside? Qin Feiyang asked. Yi Shui said, he is Longzuan's son, the Prince of the Dragons. What? It's him. Qin Feiyang was shocked and couldn't help but walk to the window again and look at the young man in white. The young man sat at the stone table and looked into the distance. His expression was calm and he exuded a scholarly aura. If one didn't know this person's identity just based on his temperament, no one would be able to resist or dislike him. This was completely different from the domineering dragons and Longzuan. What's his cultivation? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. He seems to be at the small success imperishable stage. Yi Shui transmitted her voice. What? Qin Feiyang was shocked. He said through sound transmission, when we were in the Nether King's Hell, Master and the Beast Emperor said that he had just entered the imperishable realm? I heard that he broke through to the initial imperishable stage a few years ago. Yi Shui thought to herself. Impressive. Qin Feiyang mumbled. This prince's cultivation was much stronger than the dragon princess's. Most importantly, the Beast Emperor had said that the Prince of Dragons possessed a heaven-defying divine art. If nothing unexpected happened, this person would definitely become a formidable opponent. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze and thought, what about the Chief Pavilion Master? She's locked up in the divine prison. Yi Shui said. She's really in the divine prison? Qin Feiyang frowned. Originally, he still had some hope that the Chief Pavilion Master might not really be locked up in the divine prison. She might also be locked up in other places. But now Yi Shui's words had undoubtedly completely shattered the hope in his heart. Locked up in the divine prison? This was going to be difficult to handle. Yi Shui looked at Qin Feiyang with an inexplicable color in her eyes. She transmitted her voice, how did you sneak into the Divine Dragon Island? Did you sneak into the Divine Dragon Island to save us? If it wasn't to save you, why would I come to the Divine Dragon Island? Qin Feiyang angrily glared at her. When Yi Shui heard this, her cheeks immediately flushed red, and her heart was filled with joy. Why is your face red? Are you crazy? Qin Feiyang looked at her suspiciously. You're the one who's crazy. Yi Shui was stunned and then she couldn't help but roll her eyes. What a blockhead. Shui, are you done? Outside. The voice of the Prince of Dragons sounded. It's about time. Yi Shui responded, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said to herself, what should we do now? Do I still go to the Dragon Palace? Of course you have to go. If you don't go, Longzuan will definitely be suspicious. At that time, You and your great-grandfather might be in danger. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. But, Yi Shui was a little flustered. Don't panic. Just pretend that you haven't seen us. Also, you have to continue to hate me. It's best if you hate me so much that your teeth itch. This way you won't be exposed. Qin Feiyang secretly said. But I can't hate you now. Yi Shui was a little troubled. Even if you can't hate me, you have to. Unless you want everyone to die here. Qin Feiyang said. Alright, I'll try my best. Yi Shui nodded helplessly. Not try your best, but you must do it. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Alright. Yi Shui nodded. Also, when you return to the Dragon Palace, don't tell your great-grandfather about us first. And don't think about going to the cultivation ground to look for me. After I think of a way to rescue the Chief Pavilion Master from the God's prison, I will go and pick you guys up. Qin Feiyang said. Shameless, who would think of looking for you? Yi Shui lowered her head and said with a red face. I'm serious, I'm not joking with you. Now, your every move is related to our life and death. Qin Feiyang frowned. Yi Shui was slightly stunned. She raised her head and looked at Qin Feiyang angrily. How could there be such a wooden man in the world? Do I have to say it out loud? Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. By the way, did this Prince of Dragons inherit Long Zun's ability? What ability? Yi Shui was suspicious. It's the ability to hear other people's voice transmission and see the space divine items hidden in the void. Qin Feiyang said. It seems to be possible. Yi Shui nodded. Then it seems that I have to be more careful in the future. Qin Feiyang muttered. If he met Long Zun, the dragon's princess, and this Prince of Dragons, he must not send a sound transmission in front of them. Otherwise, nothing would be able to escape their prying eyes. Then, Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Then hurry up and go. Yi Shui acted as if she didn't hear it. After pondering for a while, she mustered her courage and raised her head to look at Qin Feiyang, asking, You've been to hell for so many years, don't tell me you don't have anything else to say to me? Something else? What do you mean? Qin Feiyang had a puzzled look on his face. This is infuriating. Yi Shui stomped her feet, took the jade pendant, turned around and ran out. What's going on? Qin Feiyang scratched his head. You're out. When Yi Shui walked out of the courtyard, the Prince of Dragons immediately stood up with a gentle smile on his face. Yes. Yi Shui nodded, trying her best to make herself sad and depressed. It'll all pass. The Prince of Dragons walked up and comforted her. Thank you. Yi Shui forced a smile, turned her head to look at the courtyard, and left without looking back, accompanied by the Prince of Dragons. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the window the entire time, looking at the back view of the Prince of Dragons, his expression a little strange. This Prince of Dragons seemed to be interested in Yi Shui. Cultivation grounds. When Qin Feiyang calmly returned to the cultivation grounds, it was already almost noon. Everyone was still queuing up to receive their resources. Qin Feiyang looked from afar, then directly returned to his cave. This trip was not in vain. Not only did he resolve Yi Shui's misunderstanding of him, he also met the legendary Prince of Dragons. The most important thing was still his master. After knowing that Long Zun used Yi Shui, an old man Yi, his master would definitely be disheartened. In this way, his master would naturally choose to stay in the Black Tortoise world in the future. His master's understanding of dragons far surpassed others. With his master's help, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. There was also the Beast Sovereign. The Beast Sovereign also knew dragons like the back of his hand. Unfortunately, the Beast Sovereign was still in hell. Brother Wang. Suddenly, Li Xiaofei's voice sounded outside the cave. When Qin Feiyang heard Li Xiaofei's voice, he couldn't help but frown. Isn't this person too familiar with him? He didn't know him at all before. Brother Wang, are you there? Li Xiaofei's voice sounded again. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the cave's stone door opened. At that moment, a figure ran into the cave at a flying speed. Who else could it be but Li Xiaofei? Qin Feiyang looked at Li Xiaofei, who looked very excited. What are you so happy about? Qin Feiyang looked at him suspiciously. Of course it's resources. Li Xiaofei took out a Chengquan bag from his arms and waved it in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed the Chengquan bag and looked at it. Don't say. It's really a lot, almost 1 million. Just 1 million. Li Xiaofei laughed. 1 million is indeed a lot, but for people of our cultivation level, it doesn't seem to be much, right? Qin Feiyang frowned. Of course. If it's only 1 million soul stones, of course I won't be so excited. What really makes me excited is that we can get 1 million soul stones every year. Li Xiaofei said. Every year? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. Think about it, if we can get 1 million soul stones a year, then what about 10 years? 100 years? 1,000 years? In other words, in the future we won't have to worry about soul stones anymore. Li Xiaofei said excitedly. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched slightly. This time the dragons really put in a lot of effort. Although 1 million soul stones is a small amount, it's a terrifying number when added up. Not to mention, this time 2 million people came. 1 million per person, 10 million per person, 100 million per person. It's really unimaginable. This also proves how terrifying the foundation of the dragons is. Because even he can't take out such a big sum now. You should go and get it too. Li Xiaofei put away the Qingquan ring and urged Qin Feiyang. They won't run away, what's the hurry? Qin Feiyang shook his head. How can you still be so calm, are you still human? Li Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang strangely. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, Is there anything else? If not, don't disturb my cultivation. Fine. I'm worried for nothing. Li Xiaofei pursed his lips and turned to walk out. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the stone door closed, then lowered his head and muttered. Sacred grounds, holy mountain, Yishui, an old man Yi had already been found, so the only thing left was the chief pavilion master. As long as he saved the chief pavilion master, he could plan to leave the divine dragon island. However, the holy mountain had a ruler's divine weapon, and the sacred ground was also guarded by a supreme expert. How could he sneak in without anyone noticing? Half a month later, Qin Feiyang finally walked out of the cave and flew towards the duty hall. At this time the duty hall was empty and seemed incomparably cold. Qin Feiyang walked to the front of the door, looked at Li Chang who was sitting inside and bowed. Disciple Wang Xiao, greets Lord Li Chang. Li Chang was slightly startled. He raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Come in. Qin Feiyang walked into the duty hall. Li Chang said in an office tone, Name Cultivation, which divine dragon island are you from? Wang Xiao, Peak 9 Heaven's Realm, from the Northern Dragon God Palace. Qin Feiyang replied one by one. Northern Dragon God Palace? Li Chang was startled. He raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, So, you have also seen Qin Feiyang with your own eyes? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Chang asked, Then aren't you afraid? What's there to be afraid of? Qin Feiyang did not understand. You have seen Qin Feiyang before, so you naturally know his methods. And if you enter the divine dragon island, it means that you will become his enemy in the future. At that time, what will you use to face him? Li Chang said. Courage, of course. Qin Feiyang said without hesitation. Courage? Li Chang muttered and shook his head. These days I have asked a lot of people and their answers are almost the same as yours. I just don't know if you really have the courage to face Qin Feiyang head-on? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and asked with a smile, Then what about you, Lord? Me? Li Chang was startled. Chapter 2850. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. What do you mean? Li Chang frowned. Qin Feiyang asked, Do you have the courage to face Qin Feiyang? What a joke. Li Chang was so angry that he laughed and said, I am a dignified expert of the undead stage. So what if you are a supreme expert? Can you beat Qin Feiyang's heaven-defying artifact? Qin Feiyang directly interrupted Li Chang's words and said lightly. Hearing this, Li Chang's body suddenly stiffened. What a joke, who could beat a heaven-defying artifact? Even Lord Longzun couldn't. See, you don't have much confidence. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Are you laughing at me? Li Chang raised his eyebrows. No. Qin Feiyang hurriedly shook his head and cupped his hands. If I have offended you, I hope you can forgive me. Li Chang glanced at Qin Feiyang, took out a Qingquan bag and threw it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang caught the Qingquan bag, checked it a little and smiled. Thank you, Lord. Go. Li Chang waved his hand. Qin Feiyang turned and walked out of the door, walked to the door and looked outside. Seeing that there was no one outside, he stopped and turned to look at Li Chang, smiled and said, Tonight in the early morning, if you have time, you can come to me and we can have a good chat. After saying that, without waiting for Li Chang to respond, he turned and left without looking back. Li Chang looked up at Qin Feiyang's back, and a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. After leaving the Deacon Hall, Qin Feiyang went straight back to the cave. In the blink of an eye, a day passed and dawn came. Inside the cave there were 2 more chairs and a tea table. On the tea table, a pot of tea had been brewed, and there was an intoxicating tea fragrance. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was sitting on one of the chairs, squinting his eyes as if he was taking a nap. The entire cave, except for the fragrance of tea, was quiet. Time passed by. About an hour passed. Seeing that there was still no movement outside, Qin Feiyang opened his eyes, a trace of disappointment in them. Looks like this Li Chang. Just as he thought of this, there was a weak knock on the door. Qin Feiyang immediately turned his head to look at the stone door, and a smile crept into his eyes. With a wave of his hand, the stone door slowly opened, and a familiar figure immediately entered his sight. Who else could it be but Li Chang? I thought that you didn't care about it and didn't want to come. Please come in. Qin Feiyang got up to greet him. Li Chang glanced at the cave and walked in. Qin Feiyang waved his hand again, and the cave slowly closed. Sir, please take a seat. Qin Feiyang pointed to the seat opposite him. Li Chang sat on the chair and looked at the teapot on the table. A trace of bewilderment immediately crept into his eyes. This tea aroma, what is it? Qin Feiyang looked at Li Chang suspiciously. Where did you get this tea? Li Chang frowned. I planted it myself. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. I planted it myself. Li Chang stared at the teapot and muttered to himself. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang, saying, I have drunk this tea before. You have? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This was impossible. In the entire divine land, only he had this heavenly deity do. Some time ago I went to visit old Master Yi. At that time old Master Yi entertained me with this tea. According to old Master Yi, this was given to him by Li Bu'er, the disciple of Chief Hall Master Yi Zhong. This Li Bu'er is Qin Feiyang in disguise. And now you're saying that you grew this tea. Then wouldn't you be admitting your identity without being pressed? Li Chang said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He really didn't expect this. However, he did give a jar of heavenly deity due to old Master Yi. You are Qin Feiyang. Li Chang got up, stared at Qin Feiyang and said word by word. Qin Feiyang smiled, got up and cupped his hands, saying, Junior Qin Feiyang greets Senior. You are indeed Qin Feiyang. Li Chang's eyes trembled. It was just a speculation before, but he didn't expect it to be this person. Yes, I am Qin Feiyang. Moreover, even if you didn't see through me, I will take the initiative to confess my identity to you. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. What? Li Chang frowned. One had to know. The dragons hated Qin Feiyang to the core. And he was now a member of the dragons. Qin Feiyang actually took the initiative to confess his identity to him? Wasn't this courting death? Because I know you. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. You know me? Li Chang frowned. Yes. Being chased by my enemies and having no way out, I had no choice but to enter the Dragon God Palace. After entering the Dragon God Palace, relying on my extraordinary talent, I indeed obtained a lot of resources and finally broke through to the half-step invincible realm. However, although I obtained a powerful cultivation and had the ability to take revenge on my enemies, I had lost my freedom and could only enter Divine Dragon Island helplessly. Qin Feiyang said. Are you investigating me? Li Chang said angrily. Do you think I have so much free time? Besides, you have always been on Divine Dragon Island. I have never even heard of you before. How can I investigate you? Master was the one who told me all of this. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You still have the face to mention your master? Li Chang laughed angrily. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Still playing dumb? Go and ask around. Who doesn't know that you killed Yi Zhong with your own hands? And it's a complete annihilation. To tell you the truth, I am indebted to Grand Hall Master Yi Zhong for grooming me. If you kill him, you will become my enemy. Li Chang's eyes flashed coldly. You are indebted to Master for grooming you? Qin Feiyang was surprised. If that was the case, things would be easier to handle. That's right. Back then, it was the Master of the Dragon God Palace who ordered the Master of the Dragon God Palace to take special care of me. I know you have a heaven-defying artifact, but this is Divine Dragon Island. Now, please come with me to see Lord Dragon's sovereign. Li Chang got up and looked at Qin Feiyang expressionlessly. Qin Feiyang didn't move. He looked up at Li Chang and said, It's because of Master's death that you hate me so much and want to kill me. What if Master is not dead? The truth is the truth. It can never be changed. Li Chang snorted coldly. All right. Then I'll let you see what the real truth is. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said to himself, Master, I'll have to disturb you again. It's fine. Yi Zhong's voice sounded a little hoarse. Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and Yi Zhong's soul immediately appeared in the cave. Master of the palace. Li Chang's eyes trembled slightly. It's me. Yi Zhong nodded and smiled. What's going on? Li Chang looked at Yi Zhong and then at Qin Feiyang, his eyes full of doubts. Back then I didn't kill Master at all. Yi Qing is still alive and well. In short, this is a play that I directed. Qin Feiyang said. A play? Li Chang was slightly stunned and frowned. Why do you want to do this? Could it be? When he spoke up to hear, Li Chang looked at Yi Zhong and said, could it be that it's really as Long Zun said? You had the heart to betray the dragon race since long ago, so you put on the show with Qin Feiyang? Li Chang, you think too simply. If this old man really had the heart to betray, would I let Shuer and father stay on Divine Dragon Island? Yi Zhong sighed. Then what are you doing? Li Chang's face was full of suspicion. This matter? Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, this is because of the personal feelings between Master and Long Zun. Yi Zhong immediately rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang. Personal feelings? Li Chang was stunned and said in surprise, Master of the palace, could it be that the rumors are true? You and Long Zun. Cough cough. Yi Zhong coughed dryly and shook his head. There's no need to mention the past again. I see. Li Chang suddenly understood. Qin Feiyang also looked at Yi Zhong in surprise and said, Master, you figured it out so quickly? So fast? Yi Zhong shook his head and said, more than 10,000 years have passed in the castle. That's right. Qin Feiyang patted his head. Although only half a month had passed outside, more than 15,000 years had passed in the castle. If he still couldn't figure it out after more than 15,000 years, then he was completely hopeless. More than 10,000 years? What does this mean? Li Chang looked at the two of them suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, it means that I have a time array that is more powerful than Divine Dragon Island. More powerful than Divine Dragon Island? Li Chang was stunned. Yes. 8,000 years in a day. Qin Feiyang nodded. No way. Li Chang was dumbfounded. Divine Dragon Island's 500-year time array was already shocking enough, but now Qin Feiyang said that he still had a 1,000-year time array. What kind of monster was this? Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Zhong and said with a smile, Master, you continue to reconstruct your body and divine soul. Yi Zhong nodded and looked at Li Chang. Don't make a decision because of this old man. Follow your own heart and original intentions. Okay. Li Chang nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Yi Zhong disappeared. Li Chang looked at Qin Feiyang and lowered his head to ponder. Although Qin Feiyang said it clearly, the meaning was already very clear. He wanted him to betray the dragons. But the price of betraying the dragons was unimaginable. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, I won't force you. You can go back first and think about it. Aren't you afraid that I will tell Long Zun? Li Chang frowned. If you doubt someone, don't use him. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You're quite bold. Li Chang took a deep breath and asked, when did you come to Divine Dragon Island? What is your purpose in coming to Divine Dragon Island? On the day you killed your way to the north. And at that time the Qin Feiyang you saw was not me. It was one of my subordinates in disguise. Qin Feiyang said. Not you. Li Chang was stunned. It's actually very simple. I asked my subordinates to pretend to be me and appear in front of you. As for myself, I mixed in with the disciples of the Dragon God Palace and took the opportunity to enter Divine Dragon Island. As for the reason why I took the risk to come in, I believe it's not difficult for you to guess. Qin Feiyang said. So that's how it is. You're really amazing. You actually hid it from everyone. Li Chang shook his head. This kid's mind was too terrifying. He asked, is the reason you entered Divine Dragon Island for Yi Shui, and the others? Yes. Yi Shui, and Old Man Yi are both Master's relatives. I can't sit back and do nothing. And Chief Pavilion Master is also my subordinate now. I definitely can't ignore her life and death. Qin Feiyang nodded. Chapter 2851. The Chief Pavilion Master is also your subordinate now? Li Chang was shocked. Didn't Long Zun tell you? Qin Feiyang asked back. No. But I heard that the Chief Pavilion Master is one of the 4 emperors of the Dragon Slayer Palace. Li Chang said. That's right. Qin Feiyang said. That's not right. Since the Chief Pavilion Master is one of the 4 emperors of the Dragon Slayer Palace, why would he become your subordinate? Li Chang was suspicious. I believe you know that no matter where it is, there are internal conflicts and disputes. The same goes for the Dragon Slayer Palace. Qin Feiyang said. So that's the case. Li Chang nodded and said, just to save them, You took the risk and entered the Divine Dragon Island alone. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then have you thought about how to leave the Divine Dragon Island? Li Chang asked. Not yet. Qin Feiyang shook his head. No. Li Chang was stunned. He thought that Qin Feiyang had already thought of a way to leave the Divine Dragon Island. But he never expected that he didn't. In other words, he entered the Divine Dragon Island completely unprepared. Wasn't this equivalent to courting death? Aren't you afraid of death? Li Chang looked at Qin Feiyang and couldn't help but frown. Of course I'm afraid. Qin Feiyang smiled. Since you're afraid, why did you come to the Divine Dragon Island so impulsively? Li Chang said. I don't want to either. But there's no other way. I can only come first. I also believe that there's always a way out. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Li Chang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the face of such a situation he could still be so casual? He really didn't know how to describe this kid. However, this courage was worthy of praise. After thinking for a while, Li Chang made up his mind and looked up at Qin Feiyang saying, Then I'll take you to see Yi Shui, and the others another day. The fact that he was able to say this clearly indicated his decision. Qin Feiyang naturally understood as well. The stone in his heart was finally lifted. He said, I've already seen them. What? You've already seen him? When did this happen? Li Chang was shocked. On the second day after I arrived at Divine Dragon Island, I went to look for them. Now Yi Shui, and Old Man Yi are cultivating in the Dragon Palace. It's hard to get close to them. Qin Feiyang said. They are cultivating in the Dragon Palace? Li Chang was shocked. Yes. I think it's to make it easier to monitor them. Qin Feiyang nodded. Sigh. Li Chang let out a low sigh and said, Long Zun, aren't you afraid that the Chief Hall Master will be bitterly disappointed by doing this? Do you really think that Long Zun will consider Master's feelings? I'm afraid that in her eyes, Master is just a chess piece that can be used. Qin Feiyang sneered. Sigh. Hearing this, Li Chang could not help but sigh. It was really as the saying goes, the falling flowers are willing, but the heartless flowing water is heartless. The only headache I have now is how to get to the Chief Pavilion Master in the Divine Prison. This is the reason why I asked you to come here. Qin Feiyang looked at Li Chang expectantly. This Divine Prison. Li Chang frowned and lowered his head. After a while he looked up at Qin Feiyang and shook his head. To be honest, I can't enter the Divine Prison either. A trace of disappointment suddenly appeared on Qin Feiyang's face. But, Li Chang said again. But what? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and hurriedly asked. Li Chang thought for a moment and said, Actually, we don't have to sneak into the Divine Prison. We can think of a way to let the dragons bring the Chief Pavilion Master out of the Divine Prison. As long as the Chief Pavilion Master leaves the Divine Prison, we will have a chance, right? When Qin Feiyang heard this, he immediately lowered his head and pondered. That's right. Why bother to enter the Divine Prison? He could think of another way to let the dragons take the initiative to bring the Chief Pavilion Master out of the Divine Prison. In this way there would be a lot of opportunities. Thinking of this, a plan immediately appeared in Qin Feiyang's mind. Li Chang pondered for a moment, shook his head and sighed. Thinking about it carefully, it seems quite difficult to let the dragons bring the Chief Pavilion Master out. It's not difficult. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Li Chang looked at him in surprise. Qin Feiyang picked up the teacup and took a sip. He smiled and said, Why did the dragons imprison the Chief Pavilion Master? Why didn't they just kill her? Is there a need to think about it? Of course it's because they want to deal with you. After all, the Chief Pavilion Master is now your subordinate. For the dragons this is a very good bargaining chip. Li Chang said. That's right. For the dragons, the Chief Pavilion Master is indeed a good bargaining chip, but at the same time she is also a huge threat. Because as long as the Chief Pavilion Master doesn't die, anything can happen. Qin Feiyang said. What do you mean? Li Chang frowned. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Isn't Long Zun dissatisfied with your performance in the north? Now you go and find her to make up for your mistakes. Go ahead. Li Chang leaned over. Qin Feiyang muttered a few words in a low voice. Is this okay? After listening, Li Chang frowned. Definitely. Qin Feiyang smiled. Li Chang pondered for a while, gritted his teeth and nodded. Well, after dawn I will go find Long Zun. Then you have to be careful. I don't want to use your life to exchange for the Chief Pavilion Master's life. Forget it. Qin Feiyang warned. Li Chang smiled slightly. This young man was indeed different. Dragons were unscrupulous in order to achieve their goals. But this man's first consideration was his safety. This was the difference. Qin Feiyang asked, "Half a month ago, 1,000 of you went to the east, west, north and south respectively. How many of you came back later?" At the mention of this, Li Chang's face was full of sadness and he shook his head. "Only the 250 people who went to the north came back alive, and the others are all dead." "They're all dead?" Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Didn't I tell the ancestor not to kill them?" Qin Badian and the others did not make a move. It is said that the 250 people who went to the east died at the hands of the 5-clawed golden dragon. Li Chang said. "This bastard." Qin Feiyang secretly cursed. Couldn't he be gentler? These were all undead stage experts. What a pity to kill them. As for the people in the west and south, at this point, Li Chang closed his eyes in pain and said, "They were killed by Long Zun himself." What? Qin Feiyang was shocked. A total of 500 people. She actually erased their souls without saying a word. She doesn't treat us as humans at all. This is also why I chose to help you. I really don't want to be like these people one day and die without knowing why. Li Chang sighed. Ruthless enough. Qin Feiyang whispered. Isn't that so? I've never seen a woman more ruthless than her. Li Chang shook his head, his eyes filled with disgust. Don't worry, it will all pass. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. I hope so. Actually, right now, I don't have much of an extravagant request. I only hope that I can contribute a little to the rise of mankind. I really don't want to see future generations like us, being bullied by dragons and struggling at death's door. Li Chang said. If everyone thinks like you, then that's good. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yeah. Our human race is not united in the first place. If everyone can let go of their ambitions and desires, even if the human race is not a match for the dragons, we won't fall to this point today. Just like this time, these 2 million people who came to the Divine Dragon Island with you, look at them, what are they? I feel that in their eyes, being a lackey is something that brings glory to their ancestors. Li Chang sighed. There's nothing we can do about it. After all, not everyone has self-respect and pride. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Li Chang shook his head and said with a smile, What about you? Why did you fight with the dragons until today? Me. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He said, I'm afraid you won't believe me if I tell you this. In the past, I had never thought of becoming enemies with the Dragon Clan. My initial goal in coming to the ancient realm was purely to search for my 2 ancestors. I really don't believe it. Li Chang said. But this is the truth. The initial conflict was also started by the dragons. They intended to deprive me of the power of my bloodline. You also know how important the power of bloodline is to a person. If I lose the power of my bloodline, I will become a cripple in an instant. Of course, I can't sit still and wait for death, so I started to deal with the dragons. In the end, the grudge became deeper and deeper. They wanted to get rid of me and I also wanted to get rid of them. Qin Feiyang shrugged his shoulders and said very calmly. But as a listener, Li Chang felt that it was soul-stirring. As a young man from the lower realm, facing the pursuit of the dragons, the ruler of the ancient world, was a terrifying and despairing thing. If it were anyone else, they would have already given up resisting and obediently offered up the power of their bloodline. However, Qin Feiyang had never given up. Relying on his extraordinary perseverance and brain, he had walked all the way to today. And the heavens did not treat him unfairly. The current Qin Feiyang had already become a terrifying figure in the ancient world that no one dared to ignore. Even the powerful dragon race couldn't do anything about it. Qin Feiyang and Li Chang sat in the cave and chatted for a long time. They had a new understanding of each other. In Li Chang's heart, Qin Feiyang was a responsible and righteous young man. And in Qin Feiyang's heart, Li Chang was a person with ambition, ideals and a sense of justice. It was just that in the past, when he followed the dragons, he had no choice but to hide these things. In short, that night, the 2 of them chatted happily, and even had a feeling that they regretted not having met earlier. Chapter 2852. The next day, early in the morning, Li Chang stood in front of his cave and scanned the mountains and rivers below. He took a deep breath and then disappeared in the direction of the Dragon Palace. At the same time, Qin Feiyang sat in the cave and looked at the teapot on the coffee table. He muttered, It seems that I can't casually take out this immortal dew in front of others in the future. Fortunately, it was Li Chang who came this time. If it was someone else, such as Long Zun, the consequences would be unimaginable. Putting away the tea set, Qin Feiyang took out the space-time gate. His eyes flickered. He remembered that he could open the space-time gate when he was in the internal sea. Could he open it now on Divine Dragon Island? If he could open the space-time gate, it would be easy to leave Divine Dragon Island. However, the current Divine Dragon Island was shrouded in a barrier. And the owner of this barrier was Ice Dragon. Would Ice Dragon be able to seal the teleportation of the gate of time and space? Qin Feiyang did not dare to try now, because the opening of the space-time gate would cause too much of a commotion. He could only wait until he rescued the Chief Pavilion Master and take a gamble. Dragon Palace. Although the Dragon Palace was the most important place on Divine Dragon Island, there was no one guarding it. Of course, there was nothing strange about it. After all, the one who lived here was Long Zun, the strongest person in the ancient world. Who would dare to cause trouble here? And the Dragon Palace was a magnificent palace. The palace was more than 100 feet tall and was dazzling in gold and jade. There were stone pillars erected around it. Each stone pillar was engraved with a lifelike divine dragon. Above the main door, there was a sacred heavenly dragon engraved. Whoosh! A figure broke through the air and landed in front of the door of the Dragon Palace. Was Li Chang. Li Chang looked up at the tightly shut door of the Dragon Palace. His eyes were filled with awe. He knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "I am Li Chang. I have something to ask Lord Long Zun." "What is it?" Long Zun's voice came from inside. "It's about the Chief Pavilion Master," Li Chang replied. Whoosh! At that moment, a blurry figure of Long Zun descended outside the door. "Lord Long Zun." Li Chang bowed to the ground. "Get up." Long Zun said faintly. "I don't dare. This lowly one is actually here to receive his punishment." Li Chang knelt on the ground, not daring to move. "Receive punishment?" Long Zun was stunned. "Yes. When I faced Qin Badian and the Mermaid Emperor, my heart wavered a little. This should never have happened. Therefore, this lowly one has taken the initiative to come here and ask for punishment, Lord Dragon Sovereign." Li Chang lowered his head and said. Long Zun looked down at Li Chang and asked, "Is your confidence shaken? Or are you wavering?" "I don't dare to hide it from you, sir," Li Chang said while trembling with fear. "You're quite honest." Long Zun's tone was bone-chilling. Li Chang shivered. However, in the face of Qin Badian, the Mermaid Emperor, and Qin Feiyang, it is understandable that your confidence is shaken. After all, they're all stronger than you. As for the wavering of our position, seeing that you repented in time and took the initiative to admit your mistake, I won't bicker with you for now. But remember, there won't be a second time. Long Zun said coldly. "Thank you, Lord Dragon Sovereign, for not killing me," Li Chang cried out gratefully. Long Zun said, "Then tell me now, what do you want to say about the Chief Pavilion Master?" Li Chang got up, looked at Long Zun and said respectfully, "Lord, aren't we going to kill the Chief Pavilion Master? Why should we kill her? She's now a bargaining chip in our hands," Long Zun said. "But I don't think so." Li Chang shook his head. "Why do you say that?" Long Zun frowned. "Lord, you know Qin Feiyang. Although he's young, he's actually very cunning and capable. What if he thinks of a way to save the Chief Pavilion Master?" Li Chang arrived. "Save the Chief Pavilion Master?" Long Zun was slightly taken aback and sneered, "You must be kidding. Not to mention entering the Divine Penitentiary to save the Chief Pavilion Master. He can't even enter the Divine Dragon Island." "I know that Lord Dragon God has set up a barrier on the Divine Dragon Island, but Lord Dragon Sovereign still can't be careless. Look at Qin Feiyang. From the northern region to the Divine Land, which of the things he did were not beyond our imagination and expectations? Finish it in one sentence. Qin Feiyang is full of too many possibilities. So when facing him, we must never be as sloppy as before," Li Chang said. Long Zun couldn't help but frown when he heard this. Recalling what had happened in the past few years, it was really as Li Chang had said. Everything that Qin Feiyang had done was something that they had not expected at all. They also thought that it was impossible. But in the end, Qin Feiyang did it. For example, the 10 great divine artifacts. In their opinion, Qin Feiyang wanted to snatch the 10 great divine artifacts from them, which was simply a joke. But in the end, the 10 great divine artifacts successively went to Qin Feiyang. There was also the battle in the North Sea Star River. Whether it was Long Zun or the great ancestral dragons, they all vowed that they would be able to take down Qin Feiyang this time. However, in the end, the ancient castle merged with the Black Tortoise realm, which went beyond the boundary of the divine artifacts and caught them off guard. Then there was the Hell King. The Hell King was a killing trap that they set up specifically for Qin Feiyang. But When Qin Feiyang entered the Hell King, he actually got the recognition of the Blood Demon clan and was like a fish in water. In the end, it was them, the dragons, who were killed. There was also the appearance of Qin Feiyang, which was also full of miracles. Not to mention others, even the dragons, after entering the Hell King, had to wait for 1,000 years when the Hell King closed before they could come out. However, Qin Feiyang slipped out in advance. These things that would never happen in their eyes happened one after another to Qin Feiyang. What did this mean? It meant that, as Li Chang said, this person was full of too many possibilities. There couldn't be any carelessness. Who? Long Zun took a deep breath and looked at Li Chang. Then tell me, how should I deal with the Chief Pavilion Master? Kill him as soon as possible. Li Chang's eyes flashed with killing intent. Long Zun heard this and lowered his head in silence. Lord. Actually, in my opinion, the Chief Pavilion Master is not very valuable. Li Chang said. What do you mean? Long Zun was curious. Because the Chief Pavilion Master didn't follow Qin Feiyang for a long time, and in the past she and Qin Feiyang were opponents, so the relationship between them is purely a superior-subordinate relationship. Unlike others such as Hui Yi and the five-clawed golden dragon, they have a life-and-death relationship with Qin Feiyang. If we were to capture them and use them to threaten Qin Feiyang, they would most definitely be excellent bargaining chips. That's because it would be impossible for Qin Feiyang to watch as they died. But the Chief Pavilion Master, to be honest, I guess in Qin Feiyang's eyes she is at most a chess piece. Moreover, the Chief Pavilion Master was subdued by Qin Feiyang, so Qin Feiyang naturally took over the Treasure Pavilion. So now, in Qin Feiyang's eyes, the Chief Pavilion Master has no value except for her strength. Li Chang said. Makes sense. Long Zun nodded. So I suggest to kill the Chief Pavilion Master as soon as possible in order to avoid any trouble. After all, the Chief Pavilion Master is not weak. If she escapes, she will be a great threat. Moreover, we have to kill the Chief Pavilion Master in the cultivation place. Li Chang said. Why do we have to kill her in the cultivation place? Long Zun was suspicious. Kill one to warn the others. Li Chang's eyes flickered with a cold light as he looked at Long Zun and said, This time the ancestral dragons have brought back 2 million disciples from the outside. May I ask Lord Long Zun, among these 2 million people, are you sure that all of them are sincerely following us dragons? Long Zun raised his eyebrows and said, Continue. I also believe that most of them must be sincerely following us dragons, but we can't rule out that there are some who are purely here for resources. So, we have to completely eliminate this. And killing the Chief Pavilion Master in front of them is undoubtedly a very deterrent move. Li Chang said. Firstly, we can get rid of this root of trouble. Secondly, we can also intimidate those disciples. Mother, this is indeed a good idea to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The Prince of the Dragons appeared in front of Long Zun. His whole person had an indescribable elegance and freedom. Greetings, Your Highness. Li Chang hurriedly bowed. No need to be so polite. The Prince of the Dragons smiled at Li Chang. Long Zun looked at the Prince of the Dragons and said, You agree with Li Chang's suggestion? I agree. And let me do this. The Prince of the Dragons laughed. You. Long Zun was stunned. I have been cultivating in seclusion since I was young. Almost no one knows of my existence. Even some of the young dragons don't know that the dragons have a prince like me. My sense of existence is too low. And now, I have broken through to the minor imperishable stage, and I should let the world know that the dragons not only have you, Long Zun, the princess of the dragons, the 10 ancestral dragons, but also me, the prince of the dragons. The prince of the dragons smiled faintly. However, in this calm tone, there was an astonishing domineering aura. Long Zun heard this and remained silent as if he was hesitating. Li Chang said cautiously, Your Highness, do you still need to personally take action for such a small matter? I don't need to tell you about the position of the Chief Pavilion Master in the Divine Land. Is killing her a small matter? The Prince of the Dragons asked. Li Chang was taken aback and nodded with a smile. Listening to Your Highness, it seems that it is not a small matter. And I also want to officially meet this Qin Feiyang. The Prince of the Dragons looked up at the sky and whispered. Long Zun looked at the Prince of the Dragons in surprise. The Prince of the Dragons said, Mother, don't be nervous. I won't take the risk. I'm just sending the head of the Chief Pavilion Master to him. You call this not taking the risk? Long Zun frowned. Mother, you have to believe in your son. Your son wants to leave and Qin Feiyang can't keep me. The Prince of the Dragons smiled slightly, and his gentle eyes were full of confidence. Long Zun shook his head and said, All right then, I'll leave this matter to you. Chapter 28:53. In the cultivation place. After Li Chang returned from the Dragon Palace, he told Qin Feiyang about this matter. The Prince of the Dragons personally took action, which was somewhat beyond Qin Feiyang's expectations. Originally, in Qin Feiyang's opinion, since it was Li Chang's proposal, it should naturally be carried out by Li Chang. If it was carried out by Li Chang, it would be much easier to solve. For example, stealing a beam and swapping it for a pillar. In this way, not only could it be done silently, but it could also avoid a head-on confrontation with the dragons. But he didn't expect that the Prince of the Dragons would suddenly intervene. In this way, a confrontation with the dragons was unavoidable. When is the time? Qin Feiyang asked. 3 days later in the morning. Li Chang said. So soon. Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up, as if somewhat dissatisfied with this answer. This is the prince's decision, I can't refute it. Li Chang shook his head helplessly. In fact, their original plan was that if Long Zun agreed, the execution of the chief pavilion master would be set a month later. Why did it have to be set a month later? It was because they didn't have enough manpower now. Hui Yi, Fire Lotus, Five-Clawed Golden Dragon, and Feng Daji were guarding the 4 sides of the inland sea. Now the strongest people around Qin Feiyang were Yi Zhong and Yi Qing. But Yi Qing was only a half-step invincible realm expert. Although Yi Zhong's cultivation was strong enough, his physical body and divine soul had not been reconstructed yet. So, they wanted to wait for Yi Zhong to reconstruct his physical body and divine soul before taking action. Because in this way, while Qin Feiyang rescued the chief pavilion master, Yi Zhong and Yi Qing could also go to the Dragon Palace and join forces to rescue Yi Shui, an old Master Yi, taking care of both sides. But now, the Prince of the Dragons had intervened, and the time was set 3 days later. In such a short time, even if the ancient castle had a 1-day, 1,000-year time array, Yi Zhong couldn't reconstruct his physical body and divine soul. Could be said that the Prince of the Dragons' intervention completely disrupted their plan. How about this? At that time you will save the chief pavilion master, and I will save Yi Shui and the others. Li Chang made up his mind and looked at Qin Feiyang. Oh, you're the one who suggested this. You'll have to accompany the Prince of the Dragons the whole time. Otherwise people will be suspicious. Besides, if you really go to the Dragon Palace, how am I going to help you break the fate contract when I'm in the cultivation ground and you're in the Dragon Palace? Qin Feiyang shook his head. He couldn't help Li Chang remove the fate contract in advance, because doing so would alarm the Dragon Sovereign. Therefore he had to rescue the chief pavilion master and the other 2 at the same time, help Li Chang remove the fate contract at lightning speed. Only then would he be able to get the best of both worlds. Then what should we do? Li Chang frowned. Qin Feiyang remained silent. Let me go. Yi Cheng's voice suddenly rang out in Qin Feiyang's mind. You? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Give me a heaven-defying artifact, and I'll definitely be able to save them. Yi Cheng said. It doesn't matter if it's a heaven-defying artifact. If you want it, you can take it all. But Yi Shui, and old man Yi are in the Dragon Palace. At that time your opponent will be the Dragon Sovereign. Moreover, this is the Divine Dragon Island. The Sovereign Divine Weapon won't sit idly by. At that time, even if you can save Yi Shui, and old man Yi from the hands of the Dragon Sovereign, you won't be able to come to the cultivation ground to meet me. Qin Feiyang said. Someone has to be sacrificed. Yi Qing smiled slightly. Obviously he was ready to sacrifice himself. I absolutely won't allow you to have such thoughts. Let me think about it again. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered. Then why don't I go back first? Let me know when you've thought about it. Li Chang looked at Qin Feiyang and said. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. If he stayed here for too long, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. Before going to the Dragon Palace, they had already established a contract bridge with each other. There's one more thing. You need to confirm if the Dragon Sovereign used the fate contract to control Yi Shui, and the others. Before Li Chang left, he reminded Qin Feiyang again. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but frown. But thinking about it carefully, the Dragon Sovereign shouldn't be controlling the 2 of them. Because in front of Yi Shui, and old man Yi, she was playing the role of a good person. If he used the fate contract to control them, wouldn't it be the same as exposing his true colors? Moreover, if he really wanted to control them, he wouldn't keep them by his side to monitor them. So, this point that Li Chang was worried about could basically be ruled out. But to be honest, this was an unprecedented challenge for Qin Feiyang. On one side was the powerful Dragon Sovereign, and on the other side was the sovereign divine weapon that even a heaven-defying artifact couldn't defeat. To save the three of them and successfully escape from the Divine Dragon Island could be said to be more difficult than ascending to the heavens. But if everything could go according to his plan, it wouldn't be that difficult. It was a pity that plans couldn't keep up with changes. Now that the Prince of Dragons was involved, the best way was, swish. Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up. That's right. The best way was for Yi Shui, and Old Man Yi to come to the cultivation ground together on the day of the execution of the Chief Pavilion Master. As long as the two of them came to the cultivation ground, they would be able to save all three of them at once. This way Yi Qing wouldn't have to go to the Dragon Palace to take the risk. However, on the day of the execution of the Chief Pavilion Master, would Long Zun let Yi Shui, and Old Man Yi come to join in the fun? If Long Zun didn't let them come, then their hope would be lost. No, there was no better way than this. On the day of the execution, Yi Shui, and Old Man Yi had to come to the cultivation ground. If there was no chance, then create one. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly, and he was about to leave the cave. Brother Wang, at this moment, Li Xiaofei's voice sounded outside. This person is really annoying. Qin Feiyang rubbed his head, adjusted his expression, opened the stone door of the cave and walked out. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang looked suspiciously at the excited Li Xiaofei. What good thing did he encounter this time? Follow me. Li Xiaofei dragged Qin Feiyang and walked towards the central area of the cultivation ground. Can't you just say what you want to say? Qin Feiyang frowned. You'll know later. Li Xiaofei said without turning his head. Very soon, the two of them entered the central area of the cultivation ground. Qin Feiyang found that there were actually many people gathered below, looking at the peak of a mountain in front. Li Xiaofei pointed to the peak of the mountain. Qin Feiyang raised his head to look, and his expression immediately stiffened. Why would she come to the cultivation ground? There was a woman on the peak of the mountain wearing a pure white dress. She was devastatingly beautiful. The woman stood in front of a straw hut, seemingly waiting for something. How is it? It's an accident. Li Xiaofei chuckled. Accident? What accident? It's just a woman. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. Li Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment and asked, Damn, don't tell me you don't know who she is? Oh. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. You really don't know? Li Xiaofei was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang strangely, saying, Aren't you a disciple of the Northern Dragon God Palace? Why don't you know her? Is she very famous? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Li Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang speechlessly, then looked up at the woman with admiration. She is the granddaughter of Yi Zhong Yi Shui. What? She is the granddaughter of the Grand Hall Master? Qin Feiyang was surprised. That's right. The woman on the peak of the mountain was Yi Shui. This was what surprised him. Why did Yi Shui, suddenly come to the cultivation ground? Li Xiaofei pursed his lips, saying, I thought you didn't know her? I don't know her, but I have heard of her. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. That's true. As the granddaughter of the Chief Pagoda Master, she has both strength and status. How could she know insignificant people like us? It's just a pity. At this point, Li Xiaofei shook his head and sighed. What's a pity? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. It's a pity that Yi Zhong is dead, and he died in the hands of his disciple, Qin Feiyang. Li Xiaofei shook his head. How do you know? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. When Qin Feiyang killed Yi Zhong, it almost alarmed the entire Holy Dragon City. Is it strange that I know? Li Xiaofei frowned. But you are from the south. Qin Feiyang said. This is the purpose of socializing. Look here, there are hundreds of thousands of disciples from the Dragon God Palace in the north. As long as you have a good relationship with them, is it difficult to find out? Li Xiaofei smiled smugly. You are really bored to find out about this. Qin Feiyang shook his head. No. This is the joy of life, unlike you, who only knows how to cultivate in the cave abode all day. Li Xiaofei said in disdain. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Cultivate? He really wanted to cultivate in seclusion, but he didn't have the mood to do so. However, in the eyes of outsiders, it was true that he stayed in the cave abode all day. I heard from them that after Yi Zhong died, Lord Longzuan liked Yi Shui, very much. Now, she is even cultivating in the Dragon Palace. The Dragon Palace. That's a place we can't even get close to, but she can stay there. I'm really envious. Li Xiaofei shook his head. You're envious of this? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Aren't you envious? It's a great honor to be by Longzuan's side. Li Xiaofei said with a smile. Honor? Qin Feiyang sneered secretly. This person was indeed hopeless. Brother Wang, don't be so calm, look at those people. Li Xiaofei pointed at the crowd in front and said in a low voice, these people must be thinking about how to capture Yi Shuer's heart. What the hell? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Don't be so surprised. Although Yi Zhong is dead, we still have Longzuan as our backer. If we can win Yi Shuer's heart, wouldn't we soar to the sky directly? Li Xiaofei said with spittle flying everywhere. Qin Feiyang was speechless. These people didn't know Yi Shuer's current situation at all. If they knew, even if Yi Shuer threw herself at them, they wouldn't dare to provoke this trouble. Besides, that Prince Dragons was interested in Yi Shuer. These people could only move their stools and sit there to enjoy the show. How about it? Are you interested? Li Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang with shifty eyes. Qin Feiyang's face darkened and said angrily, I thought you called me here for something good, but it turned out to be to see a woman. You're really bored, goodbye. With that, Qin Feiyang turned around and left angrily. Li Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang's back in astonishment and shook his head. There's no future if you don't seize the opportunity. Then he looked at Yi Shuer and murmured with a smile, if only I could marry her, not to mention Longzuan as her backer, just her looks, her figure. He looked like a love-struck fool. Chapter 28:54. But Li Xiaofei didn't know that when he suddenly saw Yi Shuer, Qin Feiyang was actually happier than anyone else. Because he was about to look for Yi Shuer. But he didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, Yi Shuer would appear at the cultivation ground. Could it be that their hearts were connected? What the hell? Qin Feiyang shook his head. When it came to a man and a woman, it seemed a little ambiguous. However, Yi Shuer's arrival was indeed a good thing. Because this meant that Qin Feiyang didn't have to think of a way to contact Yi Shuer. After returning to the cave, Qin Feiyang immediately activated the concealment technique and rushed to a high point of the mountain ridge, then scanned his surroundings. He was looking for the dragon's prince. However, looking at the entire cultivation ground, he didn't see any trace of the dragon's prince. It seemed that only Yi Shuer came. He made a prompt decision. He rushed to the top of the mountain and silently landed not far away from Yi Shuer. There was a straw hut in front. And the owner of this place, if he wasn't wrong, was the person called Wang Chang. Wang Chang had the cultivation of the great achievement undead stage, an existence comparable to the ancestral dragon. To be honest, Qin Feiyang was also a little curious about this Wang Chang. The beast venerable followed the dragon venerable because he provided information to the dragon-slaying palace. Simply put, he was a spy. And Yi Zhong followed the dragons because of his personal feelings. Then why did Wang Chang follow him? Creak. Suddenly, the door of the straw hut opened, and an old man with white hair walked out with a walking stick. Medicinal fragrance? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This old man's body was filled with a thick medicinal fragrance. It seemed that he was also an alchemist. Shuer, I'm sorry, I was refining pills just now and made you wait. The old man was very kind and amiable. It's okay. On the other hand, I've been on the Divine Dragon Island for so many years, but I haven't come to visit you. Yi Shuer said. So you're here to see Wang Chang. Qin Feiyang cursed in his heart. That's true. Wang Chang and Yi Zhong were both dragons, so the two of them must be very familiar with each other. It's all right. Wang Chang waved his hand and said with a hoarse smile, the room is too messy, so this old man won't invite you in. Let's sit here and chat for a while. On the left side of the hut, there was a large locust tree. Under the locust tree, there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. It was very simple. It was filled with a simple aura. All right. Yi Shuer nodded and helped Wang Chang to the stone table. Both of them sat on the stone bench. Wang Chang took out a tea set. As he brewed tea, he said with a smile, I remember the last time I saw you, you weren't this tall. Yes. Yi Shuer nodded. Time really flies. Wang Chang shook his head and sighed. After brewing the tea, he fell silent for a moment before looking at Yi Shuer. Your grandfather's death, it's all in the past. Yi Shuer shook her head. Wang Chang was stunned for a moment before nodding. All right. It's all in the past. Let's not talk about it anymore. If you're free in the future, come and visit me more often and chat with me. Let this old man enjoy the joy of being with his family. The meaning of his words was obvious. He wanted Yi Shuer to treat him as her grandfather in the future. All right. Yi Shuer nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them silently. Seeing that the two of them were chatting about trivial matters, he flew to the door of the hut curiously and looked inside. Immediately, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. It was really quite messy inside. The hut was not very big. It was probably only 50 to 60 square meters. There was an alchemy platform on the left and a futon in the right corner. There were bottles and jars on the alchemy platform and herbs on the ground. It was extremely messy. It was hard to imagine that this was the residence of a supreme expert of the greater success indestructible realm. Indeed, an expert like this could not be looked at with ordinary eyes. Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang looked at the alchemy platform. There was no alchemy furnace or alchemy fire on it. It was obvious that Wang Chang had put it away. But there were a few elixirs on the stone platform. They were all divine life elixirs. And each divine life elixir had 4 dragon-shaped elixirs. It can't be. This Wang Chang is actually so powerful. He can refine elixirs with 4 dragon-shaped elixirs. Qin Feiyang felt very incredulous. In addition to his master, there was actually such a powerful alchemist hidden in the dragons. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chang, who was talking to Yi Shui, and his eyes flickered. Those who were familiar with him would know that this was the look of staring at prey. Qin Feiyang secretly heaved a sigh of relief and said to Wang Yu, "Don't be surprised, I'm right next to you." However, Wang Yu didn't seem surprised. There was even a faint expectation, as if she was deliberately waiting for Qin Feiyang here. 3 days later, when the chief pavilion master is executed, you must bring your great-grandfather to the cultivation place. Qin Feiyang secretly said. Hearing this, Yi Shui, secretly asked in surprise, "How do you know that they are going to execute the chief pavilion master?" "You already know?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "That's why I came to find you. But I didn't dare to go to you directly, so I pretended to visit grandfather Wang Chang, hoping to attract your attention and make you come to me." Yi Shui, transmitted her voice. "You came to me specifically for the matter of the chief pavilion master?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Yes." Yi Shui, answered. Qin Feiyang looked confused. Suddenly, he finally understood. Yi Shui, didn't know that Li Chang was now his man, and the execution of the chief pavilion master was also his plan. So, Yi Shui, thought that Long Zun unilaterally wanted to kill the chief pavilion master, and then used this method to inform him. This woman was quite smart. Killing the chief pavilion master was my plan. Qin Feiyang explained the plan in a simple and clear manner. So you were the one behind the scenes. Yi Shui, suddenly realized. This guy was indeed a ruthless person to be able to come up with such a plan. One more thing, are you and your grandfather controlled by the fate contract? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. No. Yi Shui, replied. Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief and asked again, then what about your image crystal? Long Zun said that he didn't want us to be disturbed by the outside world and cultivate in peace, so he destroyed it. Yi Shui, said secretly. It's indeed destroyed. Qin Feiyang muttered, then that's it. 3 days later we must find a way to come to the cultivation place. What if Long Zun insists on not letting us come? Yi Shui, asked secretly. Then you can look for Prince Dragons, he will definitely help you. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Why would he help me? Yi Shui, was suspicious. Find out for yourself. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned and left quietly. This bastard. Yi Shui, cursed secretly. However, on the surface there was nothing unusual. Although he was secretly talking to Qin Feiyang, he was also chatting with Wang Chang at the same time. After Qin Feiyang returned to the cave, his heart finally relaxed. As long as Yi Shui, knew, then everything would be fine. What he had to consider now was how to leave Divine Dragon Island. Divine Dragon Island had an ice dragon's barrier. Although he had met the ice dragon more than once or twice, he knew nothing about the ice dragon's strength. He only knew that it was very strong. Therefore, he wasn't sure if this barrier could seal the space-time gate. If it couldn't, then it would be easy to just leave. But if it could seal the space-time gate's teleportation, then he would have to face a situation where there was a high chance of death. Should I find a place to try? Suddenly, this thought appeared in Qin Feiyang's mind. But in the end he dispelled this idea. If Long Zun found out, then all his efforts would be in vain. As for 3 days later, even if he couldn't teleport out, he could at least save the 3 of them and fight with the dragons. In short, there couldn't be the slightest mistake now. A light flashed in his eyes. Since Yi Shui was in the Dragon Palace, then she must also know about the matter of killing the chief pavilion master. Brother Wang, are you there? Not long later, Li Xiaofei's voice once again sounded outside the cave. Qin Feiyang was now very disgusted with this person, so he didn't make a sound and pretended not to be there. Anyway, they would have a falling out in 3 days, so there was no need to waste his breath with this person. Time passed by on this day. Qin Feiyang also informed Li Chang. 3 days later in the morning, boom. A terrifying aura suddenly descended, awakening everyone who was in seclusion. This seems to be Li Chang's aura? What's the situation? Everyone walked out of the cave one after another and looked up, only to see Li Chang standing high in the sky. At the same time, inside the cave, Qin Feiyang was also meditating with his eyes closed. Sensing Li Chang's aura, he immediately opened his eyes, and 2 rays of light burst out. At the same time, Dragon Palace. The tightly shut door slowly opened, and the Prince of Dragons slowly walked out. Dressed in white, without a speck of dust, his long hair fluttered in the wind, and his entire person exuded an ethereal temperament. Swish. Long Zun also appeared, looking at the Prince of Dragons. If you really want to send the head to Qin Feiyang, you better be careful. I know. The Prince of Dragons nodded. Then go. Long Zun smiled slightly. Lord Long Zun, we also want to take a look. Yi Shui, pulled Old Man Yi out of the depths of the Dragon Palace and looked at Long Zun. What are you guys going to do? Long Zun frowned. This Chief Pavilion Master is also an accomplice in killing Grandfather. We want to see her die with our own eyes. Yi Shui said with a face full of hatred. There's nothing to see. Long Zun refused. Yi Shui couldn't help but believe Qin Feiyang's words and turned to look at the Prince of Dragons. Mother, let them go. Seeing the Chief Pavilion Master die with their own eyes, they will probably feel better in their hearts. The Prince of Dragons smiled at Yi Shui and looked at Long Zun. He's really going to help me? Yi Shui felt a little incredulous. To be able to predict this, is Qin Feiyang a god? But Long Zun raised his eyebrows. I'm here. Besides, they're just going to the cultivation ground. They won't follow me and leave Divine Dragon Island to find Qin Feiyang. The Prince of Dragons smiled faintly. All right then. Long Zun pondered for a while and nodded. Thank you, Lord Long Zun. Yi Shui thanked him happily. Go, just don't run around. Long Zun waved his hand impatiently. Yes. Yi Shui nodded. Let's go. The Prince of Dragons retreated to the side and looked at Yi Shui and Old Man Yi with a smile. The two glanced at the Prince of Dragons and quickly walked out, flying towards the cultivation ground. The Prince of Dragons was also preparing to leave, but Long Zun suddenly transmitted his voice. I won't allow you to be tempted by human women, because this will destroy the power of our bloodline as dragons. The Prince of Dragons stopped in his tracks and lowered his head in silence for a while. A trace of a smile gradually appeared on his face, but he didn't answer Long Zun. Instead, he took a step forward and chased after Yi Shui and Old Man Yi. This child can't really be tempted, right? Long Zun frowned and muttered. He couldn't help but worry in his heart. Chapter 28:55. In the cultivation ground. It was boiling. In the sky, Li Chang stood majestically, his body filled with a murderous aura. Beside him, there were 4 half-step imperishable realm experts, each holding an iron chain in their hands. Between the 4 of them, there was a woman hanging in the air by the iron chain. That woman was Supreme Cloud. However, at this moment, she had long lost her former elegance. The 4 iron chains had penetrated her body, and blood flowed out along the iron chains. She was also disheveled and covered in blood, exuding a dying aura. Who is she? Why is she in such a sorry state? The disciples below were discussing. At the same time, Qin Feiyang stood in the crowd, sizing up the Chief Pavilion Master with a trace of emotion in his eyes. Who would have thought that the woman in front of him was the powerful Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? Who would have thought that the Chief Pavilion Master would fall into such a sorry state? To be honest, he did not have a good impression of the Chief Pavilion Master at all. Even if it was because of him that she entered the Divine Dragon Island and ended up like this, he did not have the slightest sympathy in his heart. Because, if he had wanted to kill her back then, the Chief Pavilion Master would have ended up in a worse state than in the hands of the dragons. After all, what the Chief Pavilion Master had done was enough for her to die 10,000 times. However, since this woman had followed him and had such a strong cultivation, it was not against his will to save her along the way. Brother Wang, do you know her? Li Xiaofei poked Qin Feiyang's back and asked in a low voice. You don't know her? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. No. Li Xiaofei shook his head. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback. He did not even know the Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? But when he thought about it, he felt relieved. The Chief Pavilion Master would not usually appear in front of others, and would remain mysterious when she appeared. Therefore, there were not many people who knew her real appearance. I don't know her either. Qin Feiyang said. You don't know her? I don't know her either. Look at everyone, it seems that they don't know her either. What's going on? Li Xiaofei was puzzled. Qin Feiyang glanced at the curious Li Xiaofei, and he couldn't help but ponder, should I kill this swindler later? Whoosh. Suddenly, along with 3 air-piercing sounds, the prince of the dragons, Yi Shui, and old man Yi descended from the sky. Isn't that Yi Shui? Why is she here? Wait, who is that white-clothed youth beside him? Very unfamiliar. How dare he stand together with Yi Shui? How dare he? You don't know she's mine? Some of the men were immediately displeased. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips into a smile. Everyone had finally arrived. Greetings, Your Highness. When the 3 of them arrived, Li Chang immediately walked in front of the Prince of the Dragons and bowed. What? He's a prince? Everyone present, other than Qin Feiyang, had astonished expressions on their faces. Prince? Didn't the dragons only have one princess? Since when did another prince come out of nowhere? Prince? Then isn't he the son of Lord Longzun? Oh my God. I actually scolded him in my heart just now. Compared to him, what are we? Only he is worthy of Yi Shui. No. It's Yi Shui, barely worthy of him. The Prince of the Dragons, this identity is too terrifying. The people below whispered, their faces full of shock. It was too unexpected. What kind of cultivation did the Prince of the Dragons have? Although everyone deliberately lowered their voices, they all fell into his ears. This was the effect he wanted. This prince of his had been silent for too long, so long that no one knew. So this time, he wanted to use the head and blood of the Chief Pavilion Master to officially announce to the world that he was back. The Prince of the Dragons nodded to Li Chang and looked at the Chief Pavilion Master. Looking at the Chief Pavilion Master, who was covered in wounds and hung in the air by iron chains like a dead dog, there was still no change on his small face. Yi Shui was scanning the crowd, obviously looking for Qin Feiyang. Is this woman stupid? Looking around while looking for him? Qin Feiyang was secretly annoyed. Suddenly Yi Shui found Qin Feiyang in the crowd. Qin Feiyang hurriedly winked at her. Only then did Yi Shui react and quickly glared at the Chief Pavilion Master. As for old man Yi, as soon as he arrived, he stared at the Chief Pavilion Master coldly. Because he still didn't know the truth, he hated the Chief Pavilion Master from the bottom of his heart. The Prince of the Dragons retracted his gaze and looked at Li Chang. Tell everyone. Yes. Li Chang responded respectfully, glanced at Yi Shui and Li Chang without leaving a trace, and then lowered his head to look at the people below. First, let me give you a formal introduction. The one standing next to me is His Highness, the Prince of our Dragon Clan. Don't look at how young he is, but his strength is stronger than mine. His Highness is now at the minor inextinguishable stage. Li Chang shouted. What? Minor inextinguishable stage? When everyone below heard this, they all looked at the Prince of the Dragons in shock. From the looks of it, he was about the same age as them. However, they didn't expect that he had already stepped into the minor inextinguishable stage. This was too terrifying. The dragons were actually hiding such a terrifying genius. What Qin Feiyang, what Qin Badian, compared to this person, they were too far away. This was the true pride of the heavens. The Prince of the Dragons had always maintained a gentle smile, and many young women at the scene were fascinated by him. Extraordinary talent, handsome face, tall and straight posture, and this temperament, this smile, he was simply a male god in their dreams. As for the other 2, Li Chang looked at Yi Shui and said, one of them is Yi Zhong's granddaughter and the other is Yi Zhong's father. But now no one cared about Yi Shui and old man Yi. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Prince of the Dragons. As for this one, Li Chang changed the topic and walked in front of the Chief Pavilion Master. He grabbed the Chief Pavilion Master's hair and raised the Chief Pavilion Master's face. You might not recognize this face, but every single one of you here has heard of her name. Even in the entire ancient world, she is famous. She is the Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion. Li Chang shouted. What? The Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? At this moment, it was like a bomb that was thrown into the crowd. Everyone's eyes finally moved away from the Prince of the Dragons and locked onto the Chief Pavilion Master. She was the Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion. What was going on? Why was the Chief Pavilion Master tortured like this on Divine Dragon Island? She is not only the Chief Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion, she has another identity. Li Chang shouted. What identity? At this moment, the whole place fell into a dead silence. Everyone stared at Li Chang because it was definitely because of this other identity that the chief pavilion master had fallen to such a state. Her other identity is one of the 4 emperors of the Dragon Slayer Palace, Supreme Cloud, Li Chang said. She is the emperor of the Dragon Slayer Palace? As soon as the words came out, everyone was shocked. The chief pavilion master was actually one of the 2 emperors other than Qin Badian and Lu Xingyang. This was too unbelievable. Someone asked, "Have you found the other venerable sovereign?" Li Chang looked at the Prince of the Dragons. The Prince of the Dragons nodded. Li Chang took a deep breath and looked at the crowd. The other emperor has also been found. He is the Beast Emperor who rules our internal sea, Supreme Beast. It's actually Supreme Beast. Others might not know the existence of Supreme Beast, but as disciples of the 4 Dragon God Palaces, they had more or less heard of him. Just like Yi Zhong, he was also a person who was highly regarded by Long Zun. And just like the chief pavilion master, he was also a super terrifying Supreme Beast. Not to mention anything else, the fact that Long Zun could rest assured and let Supreme Beast rule the internal sea was enough to prove his strength. However, the chief pavilion master, who was powerful and had endless wealth, was deeply trusted by Long Zun, and even had a high prestige among the dragons, was actually the other 2 emperors of the Dragon Slayer Palace? If it weren't for Li Chang and the Prince of the Dragons testifying here, they wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. After knowing the true identity of the 2, everyone understood. No wonder the dragons couldn't find out the identity of the other 2 emperors after so many years. It turned out that one of them was hiding by her side. This was, of course, staying by Long Zun's side. No matter what Long Zun did, he knew it like the back of his hand. Of course, it was impossible to find out. It was just that this was too unexpected and shocking. Who would have thought that it would be these 2? Perhaps even Long Zun didn't think so before the investigation. The treasure pavilion has developed to this point under the protection of us dragons, and it has spread throughout the entire ancient world. It can be said that in the current ancient world, in some aspects, the treasure pavilion has more prestige than us dragons. But this chief pavilion master, not only is he ungrateful, but he also colludes with Qin Badian and Lu Xingyang, secretly providing resources for the Dragon Slayer Palace to strengthen the power of the Dragon Slayer Palace. He even wants to destroy us dragons. May I ask if such an ungrateful person should be killed? Li Chang roared. He should be killed. Everyone below roared angrily, and the sound of killing shook the sky. Qin Feiyang also followed suit and roared. It was lively, so he wanted to liven things up. Then tell me, how should we kill him to relieve the hatred in our hearts? Li Chang roared again. Cut him into pieces, grind his bones and scatter his ashes. Some of them roared angrily. Yes. Kill him by 1,000 cuts. The others also roared. Li Chang smiled slightly, seemingly very satisfied with everyone's attitude. Then he turned to the chief pavilion master and said, "See, this is what the people want." Bah! The chief pavilion master spat a mouthful of saliva on Li Chang's face and said, "Those bastards below have even lost their dignity as human beings. How can they represent the people's hearts?" Li Chang wiped off the saliva on his face full of hostility. "You too. You can only be a dog in front of the dragons for the rest of your life. And I, although my ambition is indeed great, at least I know what dignity is. Even if I die, my name will go down in history, and you, even if you live, your name will go down in history and infamy." The chief pavilion master laughed and let out a final roar, his words carrying an unyielding and heroic spirit. Chapter 2856. The chief pavilion master's words immediately caused the anger in everyone's heart to soar to another level, because this was not only scolding them but also humiliating them. But Qin Feiyang's eyes hid a trace of a smile. The chief pavilion master's ambition was indeed great. Not only did she want to control the Dragon Slayer Palace, but she also wanted to replace the Dragon Sovereign and become another empress of the ancient world after the Dragon Clan was destroyed. But he had to admit that in front of her position and dignity, she was still worthy of admiration. At least, she did not lose her dignity as a human. In general, she did not let him down, and this adventure was worth it. Stubborn. Li Chang also had an extremely angry expression, strode to the front of the Prince of Dragons, bowed and said, "Your Highness, please execute." The Prince of Dragons smiled faintly and walked to the chief pavilion master, with Li Chang following beside him. The Prince of Dragons stood in front of the chief pavilion master and said with a faint smile, "Your ideals are good, but the reality is very cruel. Don't worry. When the time comes, someone will naturally come to deal with you dragons." The chief pavilion master smiled coldly. At any time dragons will not be afraid of anyone, including Qin Feiyang, whom you are looking forward to. The Prince of Dragons smiled faintly, raised his hand and waved gently, accompanied by a clanging sound. A 3-foot battle sword appeared out of thin air. Clang. A wave of world-shocking sharpness immediately swept out in all directions. This battle sword was pure white without any flaws, as if it was made of a piece of beautiful jade, exuding a soft light. On both sides of the sword hilt, a holy dragon was engraved. Not only was its sharpness peerless, but it also carried an astonishing dragon might. This is... Looking at this battle sword, Qin Feiyang's pupils suddenly shrank. This was actually a heaven-defying divine artifact. He had always thought that the dragons no longer had any heaven-defying divine artifacts. And his master, the Beast Emperor, also said so. But he did not expect that this Prince of Dragons actually hid a heaven-defying divine artifact in his hands. This is the Holy Dragon Sword which has followed me since I was young. It is the biggest secret of us dragons. The only people who know of the existence of the Holy Dragon Sword are my mother and I. Even my sister, Princess Dragons, doesn't know. The Prince of Dragons stretched out his hand and gently rubbed the sword. The sacred dragon sword seemed to enjoy the prince's caress. The sword's body constantly hummed and trembled, emitting a kind of joyful emotion. This sword was personally forged by my father, the current dragon god. Until now it has never tasted blood. Today I will use your blood to sharpen its blade. The Prince of Dragons smiled. The sacred dragon sword let out a soft cry and flew out of his hand, floating above the chief pavilion master's head. You should feel honored to be able to become the sacrifice of the Holy Dragon Sword. Prince Dragons smiled at the chief pavilion master and gently pressed his finger in the air. Clang. The sacred dragon sword immediately let out an ear-piercing sword cry, and the entire sword body released a divine light, piercing straight toward the head of the chief pavilion master. If you want to kill my people, you should at least get my permission first. But at this moment, a faint laugh suddenly rang out. Clang. Immediately after, a yellow shield soared into the sky and blocked above the head of the chief pavilion master. The shield surged with divine light, emitting a strong aura. Clang. The sacred dragon sword pierced the shield, and immediately sparks flew in all directions. The next moment, a scene that shocked everyone appeared in the sky. The sacred dragon sword did not pierce through the shield and was blocked by the shield. What is that? The people present did not react for the first time. Because no one would have thought that someone would suddenly appear at this time. And in front of the Prince of Dragons. Wasn't this courting death? Whoosh. Just when everyone was confused, a figure flashed to the side of Yi Shui, an old man Yi like lightning. Before anyone could see clearly, this figure brought Yi Shui, an old man Yi to the side of the chief pavilion master. Clang. A bronze halberd surrounded by divine light appeared in this person's hand. With a wave of this person's hand, the 4 iron chains tied to the chief pavilion master also broke on the spot. Without the restraint of the iron chains, the chief pavilion master immediately fell down powerlessly. It was also at this time. Li Chang took a big step forward, hugged the falling chief pavilion master and landed beside that person. Although it was slow, the whole process was only a moment. This series of changes, not to mention the people below, even the Prince of Dragons and the 4 half-step Undying Supreme Experts, did not react. Clang. The next moment, a stone door with divine light flashing appeared. It was the space-time gate. Not bad. The person who attacked was Qin Feiyang. In order to save the chief pavilion master and the other 2 and smoothly escape from Divine Dragon Island, he had already pushed his speed to the limit. Activating the shield to block the sacred dragon sword. Rushing into the sky to save Yi Shui, an old man Yi. Taking out the bronze halberd, he cut the iron chains on the chief pavilion master. Then he opened the space-time gate. All of this, as he thought, went very smoothly. However, just as he opened the space-time gate, his pupils shrank slightly. The space-time gate could not be opened. Although he had been mentally prepared, when he really faced it now, he still could not help but panic. You are Qin Feiyang? At this time, the Prince of Dragons also finally reacted. The sacred dragon sword rose into the air and returned to his hand. The Prince of Dragons grabbed the sacred dragon sword and looked at Qin Feiyang. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes, but there was not much change. What? Qin Feiyang? The 2 million people below stared at Qin Feiyang. The 4 half-step Undying Supreme Experts who had grabbed the iron chains before also quivered when they heard this. They hurriedly stood in front of the Prince of Dragons and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. The chief pavilion master and old man Yi also had a look of surprise. Qin Feiyang did not reply to the Prince of Dragons. With a thought, the slave seal operated and the fate contract controlling him directly shattered. At the same time, he also used the slave seal to instantly shatter the fate contract in Li Chang's body. What's going on? The moment the fate contract shattered, the dragon sovereign in the dragon palace and the black dragon ancestral dragon in the clan suddenly opened their eyes. Because the one controlling Li Chang was the dragon sovereign. The one controlling Qin Feiyang was the divine stone of fate in the hands of the black dragon ancestral dragon. So they felt the abnormality of the fate contract at the same time. At this time, Qin Feiyang looked at the Prince of Dragons and smiled faintly. How do you know that I am Qin Feiyang? It's very simple. That shield is called the Shield of Thick Earth. It is the heaven-defying divine weapon of the Earth Dragon ancestral dragon. The bronze halberd is called the Sky-breaking halberd. It is the heaven-defying divine weapon of the Sword Dragon ancestral dragon. These divine weapons were all snatched away by Qin Feiyang, but now they are in your hands. If you are not Qin Feiyang, who are you? The Prince of Dragons said. Smart. Qin Feiyang smiled. But you are stupid. You actually dared to barge into the Divine Dragon Island. The Prince of Dragons shook his head, a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Is that so? Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Originally, I thought that you must be a very smart person. Otherwise, how could I, the dragons, lose to you time and time again? However, from the looks of it, it seems, because if you were really smart, you wouldn't have snuck into the Divine Dragon Island. The Prince of Dragons said indifferently. I don't want to come either, but there's no other way. There's someone I have to save here. Qin Feiyang was helpless. Are you really Qin Feiyang? Chief Pavilion Master looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. It's me. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled at Chief Pavilion Master, then took a facial restoration pill. Immediately, he recovered his true appearance. It's really him. The cultivation ground immediately boiled. This person's guts are too big, isn't it? What kind of place was the Divine Dragon Island? That was the base camp of the dragons. He actually dared to take the risk and barge in? The rumors were true. This was an extremely daring person. Chief Pavilion Master and Old Man Yi looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. Especially Old Man Yi, there was still a trace of confusion in his eyes. First, he cruelly killed Yi Zhong and Yi Qing, and now he risked his life to save them. What was going on? Are you really here to save me? Chief Pavilion Master came back to his senses and asked. What else? Qin Feiyang was speechless. When Chief Pavilion Master heard this, an extremely complicated emotion emerged in his heart, and he muttered, Is it worth it? Whether it's worth it or not, I know in my heart. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, then waved his hand and sent them to the ancient realm. Li Chang was also sent to the castle. In other words, right now there was only Qin Feiyang outside. Qin Feiyang. At this time, Long Zun descended, his eyes full of anger. You little beast, you actually came to Divine Dragon Island, you've gone too far. Accompanied by a roar, Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon also rushed over like lightning. You came really fast. Qin Feiyang glanced at the two, and with a wave of his hand, the shield of thick earth fell in front of him. The sky-breaking halberd in his hand also flashed with divine light. He did not choose to escape at the first moment. Because of the ice dragon's barrier, he could not find a way to escape at all. So it was better to stay and fight head-on to fight for a way out. At this time he was not nervous and his mind was unprecedentedly calm. This calmness made everyone present could not help but be in awe. In the face of dragons facing Long Zun he could still be so calm. Just this mentality alone was not comparable to ordinary people. What's going on? Long Zun glanced at Qin Feiyang gloomily, and looked at the Dragon Prince and asked. It's Li Chang who secretly colluded with him to save Chief Pavilion Master. Prince Dragon's ancestral dragon said. This damn bastard, I should have killed him long ago. Long Zun was furious. 3 days ago, Li Chang ran to the Dragon Palace and suggested the execution of the Chief Pavilion Master. You were the one behind it, right? Prince Dragon's ancestral dragon looked at Qin Feiyang and said. Yes. Originally, I thought of sneaking into the divine prison, but it's too dangerous. So on second thought, instead of risking my life to enter the divine prison, it's better to use a little trick and let you take the initiative to bring her out of the divine prison. Qin Feiyang nodded. What about Yi Shue'er and the others? Prince Dragon's ancestral dragon said. Do you still remember when you accompanied Yi Shue'er back to the courtyard to get the jade pendant? Qin Feiyang asked. Prince Dragon's ancestral dragon pondered for a while and said, So the killing intent she showed was because she saw you at that time. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Amazing. Your plan is perfect. Gather them all to the cultivation place, save them in one fell swoop, then open the space-time gate and smoothly leave Divine Dragon Island. But what you didn't expect is that the space-time gate can't be opened on Divine Dragon Island. Prince Dragon's ancestral dragon said. Chapter 2857. No. I thought of it. Qin Feiyang shook his head. You thought of it? This time, it was the Prince of the Dragon's turn to be surprised. Since he had already thought of it, why did he still do it? In this situation, shouldn't he change his plan? Qin Feiyang said, the opportunity is fleeting, I have to make a move. Then you have never thought of a way out? The Prince of the Dragons asked. I'm betting. Betting on whether the space-time gate can be opened. Qin Feiyang said. You're really a gambler. The Prince of the Dragons shook his head. There's nothing I can do about it. If I had a choice, would I bet on this? Qin Feiyang was helpless. The two were originally in a hostile relationship, and this was the first time they officially met, but whether it was their demeanor or tone, they were like old friends for many years. So much so that there wasn't the slightest bit of tension here. The Prince of the Dragons said, what about now? You lost the bet, what do you want to do? What else can I do? I can only perish together with you. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Perish together? The Prince of the Dragons was taken aback. Clang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a black iron rod appeared. It was 3 feet long with 7-star patterns on it, emitting a bright divine light. 7-star rod. Seeing this, Dragon Sovereign and Ancestral Dragon's eyes suddenly flashed with a shocking cold light. This 7-star rod was originally the Wood Dragon Ancestral Dragon's heaven-defying divine weapon. Clang. However, it wasn't over yet. Snowflake and Blood Blade also appeared one after another. 5 heaven-defying divine weapons. The pupils of the people below shrank. 5 divine weapons in one go, this guy was indeed amazing. At the same time, the dragons also looked at Snowflake and Blood Blade in surprise. Where did these heaven-defying divine weapons come from? The most terrifying thing was, the aura emitted by the 5 heaven-defying divine weapons had already exceeded the limit of heaven-defying divine weapons. What do you think will happen if these 5 heaven-defying divine weapons are unsealed and fully awakened? Qin Feiyang looked at the Prince of the Dragons and smiled. As soon as he said this, the people below began to panic. Not to mention 5 heaven-defying divine artifacts. Even if there was only one heaven-defying divine artifact, if the seal was really undone, a small place like the Divine Dragon Island would instantly turn into ashes. And the dragons on the island as well as them, would definitely not be spared. The Prince of the Dragons narrowed his eyes. The faces of the Dragon Sovereign and the Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon were as dark as water. Whoosh! At this moment, another 9 silhouettes arrived one after another. They were the other 9 Ancestral Dragons. It's you. The Blood Dragon Ancestor Dragon roared and immediately turned into a bloody light, attacking Qin Feiyang. You think you're worthy of fighting me? Qin Feiyang looked over in disdain. The 5 heaven-defying divine artifacts shook violently, releasing a world-destroying might that surged towards the Blood Dragon Ancestral Dragon. Not good. The other Ancestral Dragons' expressions changed as they hurriedly rushed to the side of the Blood Dragon Ancestral Dragon. Their auras surged out and blasted towards the divine might of the 5 heaven-defying divine artifacts. Rumble. The 2 invisible auras collided like torrents. Retreat. Below. No one knew who roared, but 2 million people immediately fled in all directions in horror. Li Xiaofei was also among them. His eyes were full of shock. He had never thought that this person would actually be Qin Feiyang. Boom. A wave of destructive energy surged out. The entire cultivation ground was instantly razed to the ground, and the airwave was still crazily surging in all directions. Whoosh! Hundreds of figures rushed out of the dust and smoke. These were the imperishable realm experts who had been hiding in the cultivation grounds. Wang Chang was also inside. He shouted, "Everyone hurry up and block this wave of energy." Boom! Hundreds of eternal realm powerhouses released their divine power and formed a barrier, sealing the airwave inside. They're all out. Inside the barrier. Qin Feiyang glanced at Wang Chang and the others. There were more than 500 people in total. 300 of them were half-step Eternal Realm powerhouses. The remaining 200 or so were almost all beginner Eternal Realm powerhouses. There were also a dozen or so beginner Eternal Realm powerhouses. But Wang Chang was the only one at the beginner Eternal Realm. In other words, in addition to the 750 half-step Eternal Realm powerhouses who died in the east, west, and south, There were a total of 1,300 people in this cultivation ground. However, even the 500 Eternal Realm powerhouses couldn't block the power of the 5 heaven-defying divine artifacts. The barrier was crazily twisting and cracking. Blood Dragon, Ancestral Dragon, and the others kept retreating under the impact of the divine power, their faces pale. Humph! Suddenly, Longzuan snorted and landed in front of Blood Dragon, Ancestral Dragon, and the others. He raised his arm and slapped. Boom! The divine power of the 5 heaven-defying divine artifacts was actually shattered. Qin Feiyang didn't know Longzuan's cultivation before. He only thought that it was unfathomable. But now he knew. This was a powerhouse at the peak Eternal Realm. The divine power was shattered. Wang Chang and the others couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. They quickly stabilized the barrier to avoid hurting the innocent. Lord Longzuan, kill him? Yes. We have to get rid of him immediately. Because not only did he get these heaven-defying divine artifacts, he also got a lot of divine items in the Nether King's Hell. Blood Dragon, Ancestral Dragon, and the others exclaimed. No way. There's more? Outside the barrier. The 2 million people around were all dumbfounded. Not to mention heaven-defying divine artifacts. Even a supreme divine artifact was an extravagant hope for most of them. But Qin Feiyang had more than a dozen heaven-defying divine artifacts by himself. It was really enviable. How many heaven-defying divine artifacts did you get in the Nether King's Hell? Longzuan looked at Qin Feiyang and asked gloomily. Originally, these heaven-defying divine artifacts should have belonged to the dragons, but they were all taken advantage of by this little bastard. Not many. Just 6 heaven-defying divine artifacts and 1 heaven-defying divine art. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Except for the Blood Demon Tower in the hands of the madman, the others were all with Qin Feiyang. What? 6 divine artifacts and 1 divine art. Everyone was shocked, including Wang Chang and the others. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was simply a great fortune. Damn it. Return these divine artifacts to us. Ancestral Dragon roared. Return them to you? Qin Feiyang smiled. He looked at Ancestral Dragon Black Dragon and sneered, then I want to ask you, do these divine objects have your names imprinted on them? The Nether King's Hell is the world of Sir Dragon God. Everything inside belongs to us dragons, including these divine artifacts. Ancestral Dragon said in a deep voice. Ah! Qin Feiyang suddenly laughed out loud. This was really the funniest joke he had heard in his life. What are you laughing at? Ancestral Dragon roared. I'm laughing at you for being a frog at the bottom of a well. You think that the Nether King's Hell is really the world of Ice Dragon? Ridiculous. Qin Feiyang shook his head and mocked. What do you mean? The Ancestral Dragons frowned. Let me tell you, the Nether King's Hell has nothing to do with Ice Dragon. And the real owner of the Nether King's Hell is the creator of this world. As for the dragon god that you all worship, he only has the authority to freely enter and exit the Nether King's Hell. Qin Feiyang said lightly. That's impossible. Sir Dragon God has said before that the Nether King's Hell is his world. Fire Dragon Ancestral Dragon shook his head. If he didn't say that, how could he maintain the great impression in your hearts? Qin Feiyang had a look of disdain. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The 10 Ancestral Dragons shook their heads. Longzuan couldn't help but frown. The Prince of the Dragons standing opposite Qin Feiyang had a trace of doubt in his eyes. Although it's cruel, I still have to say that your dragon god isn't as great as you think. Qin Feiyang sneered. Shut up. I won't allow you to slander him. Longzuan said with a murderous aura. The power of the divine dragon roared and charged towards Qin Feiyang with a destructive aura. Looks like this battle is unavoidable. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed as he looked at the 5 great divine artifacts. Boom. The 5 great heaven-defying divine artifacts only awakened slightly before the barrier formed by Wang Chang and the others was directly shattered. Terrifying divine might gushed out in all directions with a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The mountains and rivers continued to collapse. Longzuan's power of the divine dragon was also shattered in an instant as he was sent flying by the divine aura. Oh no! He's really going to unlock the seals of the divine artifacts. A powerhouse in the initial stage of the imperishable realm roared. Do you think I'm joking with you? Qin Feiyang smiled coldly as he looked at the heaven-breaking halberd, 7-star rod and shield of thick earth and shouted, Unlock the seals. Wait, but then, the Prince of the Dragons spoke. Qin Feiyang looked at the Prince of the Dragons. Even if you let them unlock the seals and destroy the Divine Dragon Island, in the end, you will still die under the blade of the sovereign divine weapon. The Prince of the Dragons said. Qin Feiyang said, with you dragons as my scapegoat, it's worth dying. Why bother? We can solve it in another way. The Prince of the Dragons said. Another way? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and said with a smile, tell me about it. Let's have a fair fight. If you win, I'll let you leave the Divine Dragon Island. And if you lose, then leave everything behind on the Divine Dragon Island. Including you. The Prince of the Dragons said. Meh. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. That's right. I won't kill you because I, the dragons, need talents like you. If you lose, you will follow me, the dragons, and serve me, the dragons, forever. What do you think of this proposal? The Prince of the Dragons laughed. Don't kill me? Qin Feiyang was stunned and said, I heard that your mother deprived me and my ancestors of the bloodline power to help you? Aren't you tempted by the power of the purple gold dragon blood? Of course I'm tempted. But I admire you more. If you were deprived of your bloodline power, then your value would be gone. Then why would I let you stay in the dragons? Thus, what I want is you as a person and not your bloodline power. The Prince of the Dragons said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. This Prince of the Dragons was indeed more interesting than the Dragon Sovereign and the 10 great ancestral dragons. Child, don't mess around. The Dragon Sovereign looked at the Prince of the Dragons and said angrily, Mother, I'm not messing around. We, the dragons, as the rulers of the ancient world, shouldn't always think of occupying, plundering, and suppressing. What's the difference between these actions and the tyrants of the secular world? So, by doing this, not only will it not make the creatures of the ancient world willingly submit, but it will also cause them to be dissatisfied, disgusted, and disgusted. And in my opinion, only benevolence, morality, and compassion can make them truly support and respect us. The Prince of the Dragons laughed. Chapter 28:58. Soft-hearted. What's the difference if you give it to Qin Feiyang like this? Longzuan was furious, and there was a hint of disappointment in his tone. Mother, this isn't soft-hearted. It's the way of governing the world. The Prince of the Dragons shook his head. Ridiculous. Those who obey me will prosper and those who oppose me will perish. This is the way of governing the world. The dragons shouted. The Prince of the Dragons was silent for a while and didn't say anything else. He looked up at Qin Feiyang and smiled faintly. Do you dare? Qin Feiyang looked at Longzuan sarcastically and smiled at the Prince of the Dragons. It's a fair fight. Why wouldn't I dare? All right. The Prince of the Dragons nodded, his eyes full of admiration. He turned to Longzuan and said, Mother, please send us to the galaxy. I won't allow such a childish trick. Longzuan said coldly. Then what do you want, Mother? Do you really want to give up the entire Divine Dragon Island and all the dragons? The Prince of the Dragons was helpless. As long as we can kill him, we can start all over again. All ancestral dragons, listen up. Take your people and evacuate the Divine Dragon Island immediately. Longzuan shouted. Yes. The 10 ancestral dragons replied respectfully. Wait. The Prince of the Dragons hurriedly shouted at the 10 ancestral dragons, then looked at Longzuan and said anxiously, Mother, even if you evacuate your people, what about the resources of the Divine Dragon Island? You know that resources are the foundation of a force. If all the resources of the Divine Dragon Island are destroyed, how many years do you think it will take to recover? Also, don't forget that Qin Feiyang is not alone. Outside the inner sea, there are the 8 heaven-defying divine artifacts, Qin Badian, and the Dragon Slayer Palace. Think about it. If we really go to war with them, can our dragons really deal with it? Yes, no. Even if the sovereign divine weapon is used, I'm afraid both sides will suffer losses. So, since there is a better way to solve this problem, why must we go to war? Whether it's the dragons, humans, or beasts, they are all creatures of this continent. I really don't want to see a scene of people dying. The Prince of Dragons sighed. The Divine Dragon Island indeed had a sovereign divine weapon, and the sovereign divine weapon could indeed kill Qin Feiyang. But you have to know, Qin Feiyang had more than one heaven-defying divine tool. If they really went all out, they would only need an instant to destroy the entire Divine Dragon Island. Longzuan glared at the Prince of Dragons. Although her face was covered by the mist, one could feel that she was furious. However, regarding the Dragon Prince's performance, Qin Feiyang had a whole new level of respect for him time and time again. He had thought that this Prince of the Dragon race would be like the Dragon Sovereign, ruthless and merciless. But who would have thought that he actually had a heart of compassion for the common people? Were they really mother and son? One was selfish and tyrannical by nature, while the other was affectionate and righteous, compassionate and compassionate. The difference was too great. Don't say it. If the dragons were to be led by this prince, the dragons would definitely not be the dragons of today. He would definitely be respected and supported by others. The dragon-slaying palace would not exist. The grudges between him and his ancestors and the dragons would not have arisen. What a pity. This prince was still too young. He did not have the authority to rule the dragons and lead the dragons. Mother, please believe in your son. All the decisions your son has made are for the good of the dragons. The Prince of Dragons looked at Long Zun pleadingly. Nonsense, this is truly nonsense. Long Zun was furious, but he seemed to be helpless as he said, "All right, I promise you. But listen carefully, you can only win, you cannot lose." "Thank you, mother." The Prince of Dragons bowed with a faint smile on his face. That smile was filled with confidence. "Also, no need to go to the Star River, just go to the Inner Sea," Long Zun said. "Inner Sea?" The Prince of Dragons was stunned and frowned. "Aren't there a lot of sea beasts in the Inner Sea? Before the war starts, I will transfer them to Divine Dragon Island," Long Zun said. "Thank you, mother." The Prince of Dragons smiled. Ancestral Dragon Black said, "Lord Long Zun, your highness, if you let Qin Feiyang leave Divine Dragon Island, that is equivalent to letting a tiger return to the mountain." "That's right. Lord Dragon God's barrier only covers Divine Dragon Island. Once he leaves Divine Dragon Island, the sky is vast. With Qin Feiyang's ability, he can do whatever he wants." The other ancestral dragons also spoke. Because they had the same idea as Long Zun. Since there was this opportunity, even if they had to pay a heavy price as long as they could get rid of Qin Feiyang, it didn't matter. "I have made up my mind," the Prince of Dragons said. "Your Highness, please reconsider." The 10 ancestral dragons bowed. "All right. If you really want to lose the entire Divine Dragon Island and all the dragons, then do as you please." The Prince of Dragons was also a little angry. It wasn't easy to convince his mother, but he didn't expect another 10 stubborn old men to run out. The 10 ancestral dragons looked at each other, sighed helplessly and cupped their hands. "We have offended you, I hope your highness can forgive us." "It's fine." The Prince of Dragons waved his hand. "Obviously." The Prince of Dragons was still quite dignified among the dragons. "Let's go." With a wave of his hand, Long Zun swept up Qin Feiyang, the Prince of Dragons and the 10 ancestral dragons, and descended on the west coast of Divine Dragon Island. The sea was right in front of them with rolling waves. However, no matter how big the waves were, they were unable to rush into Divine Dragon Island. Because on the coastline, there was an invisible barrier that blocked the waves. Qin Feiyang scanned the barrier in the void, and suddenly his heart moved, and he sent a sound transmission. "Snowflake, can you open the space-time law and escape?" He had forgotten that Snowflake also had the ability to travel through time. "No. As soon as it appeared, I tried it in secret. This barrier laid down by the Divine Dragon is not an ordinary barrier, it has the ability to seal the power of law." Snowflake's artifact spirit thought. "So it's like that." Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. Long Zun glanced at Qin Feiyang and said indifferently, "Do you still not understand? This is a barrier that was specially set up for you." Qin Feiyang's heart trembled, and he secretly cursed himself for being careless. He had actually overlooked that Long Zun had the ability to spy on others' sound transmissions. "Specially set up for me?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Then shouldn't I feel honored?" "You should indeed feel honored." Long Zun snorted coldly, and with a wave of his hand, the barrier hidden in the void suddenly appeared. This was an almost transparent barrier, emitting strands of cold air, and also a pure dragon's might. The Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon sent a sound transmission. "Lord Long Zun, you have to think carefully, this is your only chance. You all know this child's character. He won't change what he's decided on." Long Zun sighed, and as a stream of divine power poured into the barrier, it immediately opened a gap. "You really want me to leave Divine Dragon Island?" Qin Feiyang glanced at Long Zun. Long Zun's performance today was really too surprising. He originally thought that Long Zun might secretly do something, but he actually didn't. It seemed that the position of the Prince Dragons in Long Zun's heart was not ordinary. But thinking about it, it made sense. Which mother didn't love her children? If today's identity was exchanged and Long Zun was replaced by Lu Qiyu, and the Prince Dragons was replaced by Qin Feiyang, then Lu Qiyu would definitely follow Qin Feiyang. This was motherly love. "Go out." Long Zun took a deep breath, retreated to the side, and looked at the Prince Dragons and Qin Feiyang. "Please." The Prince Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked at the prince dragons and said, "Are you not afraid that when I go out, I will open the door of time and space or travel through time and space to leave? Then I can only say that I made a mistake, and in the future, you are no longer worthy to be my dragon's opponent." The prince dragon smiled faintly. Qin Feiyang smiled, turned around, stepped out of the barrier, and landed in the sky above the distant sea. The cool sea breeze blew on his face. The battle intent in Qin Feiyang's body was already restless. Not to mention anything else, just the character of the prince dragons was worthy of his respect. In this battle he would accompany him to the end. Qin Feiyang withdraw. Snowflake's artifact spirit transmitted. Withdraw. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, looking at the 5 heaven-defying artifacts and said, "You guys go to the castle first." "You really want to fight?" Snowflake was stunned. Honesty is a person's basic principle. Qin Feiyang laughed. "You talk about honesty with the dragons? Are you stupid?" Snowflake was secretly annoyed. "It's not about honesty with the dragons, it's just the prince dragons alone." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the 5 heaven-defying artifacts into the Black Tortoise realm. Shwa. At this time, the prince dragons also walked out of the barrier and stood opposite Qin Feiyang. "Not bad. I didn't make a mistake. If you really want to leave, no one can stop you now." The prince dragons smiled. "Then let's begin." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Whoosh. At this time, Wang Chang and the others also rushed over, as well as the 2 million disciples. Other than that, the various races of the dragons also came one after another. Among them were a few familiar faces. For example, the 10th elder of the Black Dragon clan, the Patriarch, and so on. "Lord Ancestral Dragon, what's going on?" The Patriarch of the Black Dragon clan glanced at Qin Feiyang and the Prince Dragons, then turned to look at the Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon suspiciously. "Nonsense. This is simply nonsense." The Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon snorted coldly. "He's Qin Feiyang?" Although Qin Feiyang had been to the inland sea several times, he had never entered the Divine Dragon Island. So there were many dragons who saw Qin Feiyang for the first time. Especially some young dragons, their eyes were full of curiosity. The crack on the barrier had already closed. The dragon sovereign stood in front of the barrier, looking at Qin Feiyang and the prince dragons, his eyes flashing with an inexplicable light. Oh. On the sea, the wind gradually rose and the waves rolled. This was caused by the aura of Qin Feiyang and the prince dragons. They slowly released their aura. The battle was about to start. Since it was a fair battle, the prince dragons naturally wouldn't use his initial imperishable stage cultivation. Boom. When the prince dragon's aura soared to the peak 9th heaven stage, it suddenly stopped. Qin Feiyang's aura had also soared to the peak state. Crash. The sea here was already swept by a storm and huge waves covered the sky. Chapter 28:59. Swish. Suddenly, as if they had discussed this beforehand, the two rushed towards each other at the same time. Huge waves hit them and the seawater instantly evaporated. Both of them had already put away their lazy attitude, and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Boom. In an instant. When the two met, they raised their fists and threw a punch at each other. The two fists collided fiercely. A terrifying and destructive aura surged in all directions like a torrent. Hundreds of thousands of miles of sea area boiled in an instant. At the same time, Long Zun appeared above the barrier and waved her hands in the air. At that moment, the entire inland sea, whether it was the sea beasts at the bottom of the sea or the sea beasts on the various islands, all felt an invisible force descending. The next moment, all the sea beasts appeared above Divine Dragon Island. The densely packed sea beasts all had bewildered looks on their faces. Wasn't this Divine Dragon Island? Looking at the battle between Qin Feiyang and the Prince of Dragons, they suddenly understood. It turned out that Long Zun was protecting them. This was new. Long Zun was actually protecting these weak sea beasts? Actually, Long Zun wasn't protecting them. Although the Prince of Dragons didn't want to hurt the sea beasts in the inland sea, Long Zun didn't have such thoughts. In her eyes, these sea beasts were just ants. If they died, she could just go to other sea areas to catch them. The reason why she moved these sea beasts was out of consideration for Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's slaughter zone was well known to the world. Especially the dragons, they had been repeatedly killed by the slaughter zone to the point that they couldn't fight back. So, Long Zun moved these sea beasts because she didn't want Qin Feiyang to have a chance to activate the slaughter zone. Above the sea, Qin Feiyang and the Prince of Dragons' fists collided, and the power kept rushing to the other side. Long hair fluttered in the wind, and their clothes fluttered. Neither of them had any expression on their faces, but there was a trace of surprise in their eyes. Qin Feiyang was quite confident in his physical body and strength. Apart from the Blood Demon clan and Wang Ming, he wasn't afraid of anyone in this regard. But what he didn't expect was that the body and strength of the Prince of Dragons were actually on par with his. Similarly, the princes of the dragons were the same. In the past, he had specially tempered his physical body, so he was very confident in the strength of his physical body. Moreover, his true form was a mystical dragon. The physical body of a divine dragon was naturally stronger than that of a human. But this human's physical body and strength were actually comparable to his? It seemed that this person's reputation was not undeserved. Boom. Both of them exerted their strength at the same time. Their strength surged out from their arms and blasted towards each other. Immediately, their bodies shook and their feet staggered at the same time. Then they fell back. Amazing! The Prince of the Dragon's bright eyes flickered with divine light. "You're not bad either," Qin Feiyang said. Before he finished speaking, the two of them rushed out at the same time and attacked each other. Bang! Bang! There weren't any fancy moves, but every punch hit the flesh. There was also the battle awareness and experience. The Prince of the Dragons' battle awareness surprised Qin Feiyang. Logically speaking, this Prince of the Dragons had been cultivating in seclusion in the Dragon Palace all day. He shouldn't have experienced many battles. But now, the battle awareness and experience displayed by the Prince of the Dragons were actually not inferior to his. Although I have been cultivating at the same time, I have also been fighting with my other self. The Prince of the Dragons seemed to have seen through Qin Feiyang's doubts and said, "Your other self?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "That's right." The Prince of the Dragons nodded. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "You will know in the future." After the Prince of the Dragons finished speaking, he took a very strange step and instantly appeared behind Qin Feiyang. Then he punched towards Qin Feiyang's back. "Auxiliary divine art?" Qin Feiyang murmured. Boom. He took out the Heavenly Dragon 9 steps and instantly disappeared in front of the Prince of the Dragons. "Interesting," the Prince of the Dragons whispered. Without any hesitation, he turned around and punched out. As expected, Qin Feiyang was right behind him. The Prince of the Dragons was still able to react at such a fast speed. Furthermore, he was able to determine that Qin Feiyang was behind him. This kind of consciousness could no longer be described as terrifying. Boom. The two once again punched each other and immediately separated. Their speed was unleashed to the extreme as they crazily clashed in the air above the sea. Those below the 9 heavens realm couldn't see their figures at all. They could only hear the sounds of collision and the flames that appeared when they collided. However, people like Long Zun, the ancestral dragons, and Huang Chang could clearly see the two. "This Qin Feiyang is getting more and more terrifying," Ancestral Dragon Black Dragon said in a deep voice. "Yeah. What was his cultivation level before entering the Nether King's Hell? But in just a short 200 years he actually stepped into the peak 9 heavens realm. At this speed, I'm afraid it won't be long before he enters the imperishable realm. When he enters the imperishable realm and opens the slaughter zone, he won't even need a divine artifact to fight with us." The Fire Dragon and the Ancestral Dragon were worried. "What do you mean he can fight with us? I'm afraid that even if he doesn't use a divine artifact, we will only be killed in seconds." The Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon said. Hearing this, the Fire Dragon, the Ancestral Dragon, and the others were stunned. That's right. When the slaughter zone was open to a certain level, it could even crush a divine artifact. And they couldn't even block a divine artifact. Naturally, it could crush them too. Thinking of this, their hearts became extremely heavy. "Lord Long Zun, no matter what, we have to get rid of him today," the Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon said. Long Zun looked at Qin Feiyang and the Prince of the Dragons in silence. "Fuck you. This guy is Qin Feiyang." Li Xiaofei stood in the crowd and looked at Qin Feiyang cursing. "Li Xiaofei, you're so close to Qin Feiyang. Are you also his accomplice?" A young man next to him stared at Li Xiaofei and asked. Li Xiaofei's expression changed. He looked at the young man and said in a low voice, "Bastard, don't talk nonsense. You'll get me killed." "Am I really talking nonsense? If you're not his accomplice, why are you living next door to him?" The young man sneered. "Damn you, don't slander me. Living next door to him means I'm his accomplice." The hundreds of thousands of people in the Dragon God Palace in the north all came from the north with Qin Feiyang. Are they also Qin Feiyang's accomplices? Li Xiaofei stared speechlessly at the young man, then looked at Qin Feiyang again and muttered, "If I knew he was Qin Feiyang, would I dare to live next door to him?" Above the sea, the battle became more and more intense. Wherever the two went, the void shattered and the waves surged. Swish. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the void not far away. 5 figures walked out of the crack one after another. Qin Badian, Lu Xingyang, Mermaid Emperor, Black Wing Emperor, White Wing Emperor, Longzuan, the 10 ancestral dragons, Wang Chang and a group of Eternal Realm experts immediately looked at the 5 people with cold light in their eyes. Because they were worried about Qin Feiyang's safety, Qin Badian and the others had been staying in the northern inland sea. Lu Xingyang, Mermaid Emperor, Black Wing Emperor and White Wing Emperor. Although they didn't know Qin Feiyang had sneaked into Divine Dragon Island at first, Qin Badian later told them. Compared to Qin Baishan's reaction, they were very shocked and angry. So, they stayed on the coast of the northern inland sea and paid attention to the movements of Divine Dragon Island. In other words, they were attracted by the fluctuations of the battle. So it's Feiyang who is fighting here. Qin Badian glanced at Longzuan and the others, then looked at the battlefield and nodded. He should be the legendary Prince of Dragons. Lu Xingyang looked at the Prince of Dragons with a trace of surprise in his eyes. This young man was a bit powerful. Besides him, who else in the younger generation of dragons can fight with Feiyang? Qin Badian laughed. Seeing that Qin Feiyang had already come out of Divine Dragon Island, he was relieved. As long as he left Divine Dragon Island, he would have a way to save Qin Feiyang. But looking at the situation now, it seemed that he didn't need to do anything. It was just that, why would Feiyang fight with the Prince of Dragons? Logically speaking, shouldn't Longzuan and the 10 ancestral dragons personally take action to remove Feiyang, this thorn in their side? But now they were all standing inside the barrier and watching silently? What was going on? Qin Feiyang and the Prince of Dragons also sensed the arrival of Qin Badian and the others. The two separated tacitly and looked at Qin Badian and the others. Qin Badian, Lu Xingyang, Mermaid Emperor, Black-Winged Emperor, White-Winged Emperor. The Prince of Dragons glanced at them one by one. Sure enough, they were not a group of ordinary people. Especially Qin Badian. He was like a natural emperor, making people involuntarily want to worship him. Although he had long known about Qin Badian and the others, and also knew about the deeds of Qin Badian and the others, this was the first time he officially met them. This time it left a deep impression on him. Similarly, it was also the first time Qin Feiyang saw the Mermaid Emperor, Black-Winged Emperor and White-Winged Emperor in person. He was still very unfamiliar with the 3 of them. However, seeing the arrival of the 5 ancestors, his heart felt more at ease. Of course, he could not lose to the Prince of Dragons, because he could not embarrass the 2 ancestors. Let's continue. Qin Feiyang did not say a word to Qin Badian and the others. He turned to look at the Prince of Dragons and said, "Okay." The Prince of Dragons nodded. The 2 of them unleashed their auras and attacked each other again. The battle instantly became white-hot, and the sky here darkened. The wind was raging and the sky was trembling. Although they did not use their divine power, divine arts or divine weapons, the terrifying waves that filled the air were enough to instantly injure a peak 9th Heaven Realm expert. This was their strength. Under the undead realm they were invincible kings. Everyone thought that the battle between the 2 of them would end soon. But the 2 of them seemed to be testing each other and did not use their full strength. This contest of physical strength lasted for an entire hour, and both sides were equally matched. There were many wounds on both of their bodies. But for them these injuries were nothing. Qin Feiyang's purple gold dragon blood had a strong recovery ability. Coupled with the flame of life, not to mention some superficial wounds, even serious injuries could be quickly healed. The Prince of Dragons was the same. He had the heavenly dragon power, and its recovery ability was not inferior to the purple gold dragon blood. In other words, the 2 of them were evenly matched in terms of strength and ability. Chapter 2860. The wind swept across millions of miles of the sea, and the rolling waves covered the sky. The 2 of them charged into the sky, collapsing the sky and then into the bottom of the sea, stirring up the sea in all directions. However, although the battle was extremely fierce, there was a smile on both of their faces. This kind of smile seemed to have met a confidant. Boom. The 2 of them once again punched each other. Whether it was the Prince of Dragons or Qin Feiyang, they both spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. However, between their eyebrows, there was not the slightest sign of weakness, and their battle intent was endless. "It's about time to warm up," Qin Feiyang said. "And next, bring out your true ability and fight with all you've got." The Prince of Dragons nodded. After fighting for half an hour, it's actually just a warm-up? When people like Li Xiaofei heard the words of the 2, they were all stunned. This half an hour of fierce battle, everyone witnessed it with their own eyes. Although they had only activated their support-type divine arts and did not use any other divine weapons or divine arts, each of their attacks was fatal. Every moment of collision was also soul-stirring. Could be said that a little carelessness or a little slower reaction and one of them would lose their life. In their opinion, this was already very terrifying. But they did not expect that the two of them would actually say that it was just a warm-up? If the warm-up was already so strong, then how terrifying would the real battle be? These two were monsters. Boom. As soon as the two of them finished speaking, divine power immediately broke out of their bodies and blasted in all directions. The terrifying destructive force suddenly swept in all directions, and the void in this area collapsed crazily. The sea below even set off huge waves. Heavenly Dragon Secret Art, Moon Slashing. The Prince of Dragon's eyes were like torches, and with a low roar, a milky white light sword appeared in the sky. This light sword was 1,000 feet long, exuding a sharp edge that could destroy heaven and earth. This was impressively a supreme divine technique. Divine Dragon Seal. Qin Feiyang's eyes were also as bright as the stars. Accompanied by a loud dragon roar, a blood light rushed into the sky. In an instant, a 1,000-meter-long divine seal appeared in the sky. After taking the pill given to him by Qin Badian, the divine dragon seal also changed color. In the past, the divine dragon seal was purple-gold in color and had a sacred aura. At this moment, the divine dragon seal was completely crimson in color, as if it was formed by a combination of baleful aura and blood qi. A single look at it was enough to make one's scalp tingle. This is also a supreme tier divine art. Someone muttered. Rumble. The two supreme-grade divine arts, carrying with them the power to destroy the world, fiercely collided. The world instantly lost its color. Milky white divine light and blood-red light filled every corner of the room. Their bodies trembled as they spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Even the power of the deity technique is the same? Everyone was stunned. If they continued to fight like this, how would they be able to determine the winner? Heavenly Dragon Art, Divine Moon. While everyone was still in shock, the Prince of the Dragons made another move, pointing at the sky. The sun immediately disappeared, and the earth fell into darkness. What happened? Isn't it morning? Why is it so dark? Everyone looked up at the sky, their eyes filled with suspicion. Boom. In the next moment, a vast and mighty aura erupted from the top of the clouds. This aura was also filled with a sacred aura. Following closely, above the pitch-black sky, wisps of milky white light emerged. As soon as this light appeared, it became more and more dazzling. Finally, a huge round moon appeared at the top of the clouds. At that moment, the world here was shrouded in a milky white light. It was like a real round moon. However, although it looked beautiful, it was filled with a great sense of danger. Qin Feiyang felt it the most clearly. The power of this round moon was probably enough to kill any nine heavens realm. However, he was not afraid at all. Similarly, Qin Feiyang pointed at the sky. Blood clouds suddenly appeared in the upper half of the sky. Following closely, a blood-red statue appeared. This was the third move of the Divine Dragon Art, 9-5 Supreme Tier. On one side, the divine moon was resplendent, and on the other side, blood light surged. The two separated the sky into two halves, opposing each other as equals. The world here was once again shrouded in blood light and milky white light. The terrifying divine power was like a tide, drowning in all directions. Although the Divine Dragon Island had a barrier, the humans, divine dragons, and sea beasts inside could not help but feel fear. These two divine arts could be considered as the strongest killing techniques apart from the heaven-defying divine arts. Divine Moonfall. The dragon's prince's figure was tall and straight, as handsome as jade, like a god. He gently pressed his finger. That round of divine moon immediately fell from the top of the sky. Shatter it. Qin Feiyang also said softly. Clang. The statue raised the broken sword in his hand and slashed at the divine moon. The two divine arts collided once again, erupting with a dazzling light and a deafening rumble. The two spat out another mouthful of blood. Strong. Then what's next? The dragon's prince's eyes were incomparably sharp, and the power of the heavenly dragon roared out. 1, 10, 90. A total of 90 heavenly dragons appeared in the sky, each lifelike, and their dragon power shook the world. Heavenly Dragon Art, Heavenly Dragon subdues demons. The dragon's prince waved his hand, and the 90 heavenly dragons roared in the sky and swooped down toward Qin Feiyang. Their auras were firmly locked onto Qin Feiyang. With their auras locked onto Qin Feiyang, Qin Feiyang could not avoid and could only meet them head-on. This is too strong. The aura of each heavenly dragon has already reached the peak of the divine arts. Can Qin Feiyang take it? The humans on the island began to discuss. If he can't even take it, can he still be called Qin Feiyang? Qin Badian laughed. As expected, Qin Feiyang did not have the slightest bit of nervousness on his face. Clang. The next moment, Qin Feiyang took a step forward, and waves of sword chi rushed out of his body like a tide. In the void above, 90 flaming sword shadows suddenly appeared. The sharpness and aura of these sword shadows had also reached the peak of the divine arts. This person is indeed powerful. Everyone's pupils contracted. Clang. With the intertwining sound of swords and dragon roars, 90 sword shadows and 90 heavenly dragons crazily fought in the sky. At this moment, the sky was full of sword shadows and heavenly dragons flying and roaring. A rain of light sprinkled down, gorgeous and dazzling but full of danger, because each drop of this rain of light was enough to kill a perfect nine heavens realm. The void had already turned into chaos. In the sea below, the seawater also instantly evaporated. In the sea further away, the waves covered the sky and covered the earth, but they could not get close to this area, because as long as they got close, they would also evaporate in an instant. In the sky, the heavenly dragons and sword shadows crazily fought. Below, the Prince of Dragons and Qin Feiyang stood facing the wind, smiling at each other. Your strength really surprises me more and more, the Prince of Dragons said. Your strength also surprises me. This heavenly dragon secret art should be created by you, Qin Feiyang said. That's right. The Prince of Dragons nodded and asked, then what about this sword shadow? Is it also created by you? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, that's why I'm not as good as you. You're really modest. The Prince of Dragons smiled and said, don't hide it, take out your true abilities. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Heavenly Dragon Unification. The Prince of Dragons opened his mouth, and the 90 heavenly dragons immediately merged into one. Immediately, a huge dragon appeared out of nowhere, and the dragon's might soared to another level. I'll go. Is this the rhythm of a heaven-defying divine arts? Everyone was shocked. Heaven-defying divine arts? That's impossible. However, this heavenly dragon unification is already invincible. I'm afraid that other than the heaven-defying divine arts, no one can compete with it. It's hard to say. After all, his opponent is Qin Feiyang. Everyone expressed their opinions and discussed in low voices. Heavenly Dragon Unification. Above the sea, Qin Feiyang looked at the huge dragon, and the smile in his eyes became even stronger. Then he looked at the Prince of Dragons and said, we are really fated. Why do you say that? The Prince of Dragons asked with a smile. Qin Feiyang did not answer and spat out a few words with a smile. 9 returned to 1. The 90 sword shadows also instantly merged into one. Clang. A sword shadow of 10,000 feet appeared, its sharpness destroying the world. Haha, as expected, it's fate. The Prince of Dragons laughed. Even the moves were the same. If this wasn't fate, then what was? This Qin Feiyang, I really underestimated him in the past. Yeah. Originally, I thought that other than the heaven-defying divine artifact and the heaven-defying divine arts, his own strength wasn't that great. But I didn't think that his own strength would be so strong. You're not the only one. Ask the people here who didn't think so before. They all thought that the reason he was so arrogant was because of the heaven-defying divine artifacts. But now I know that even without those heaven-defying divine artifacts, he actually has the ability to be arrogant. Everyone looked at the sword shadow in shock. The power of the sword shadow was not any weaker than the dragon. Clang. The two ultimate killing moves were like two fierce beasts clashing together. Destructive shockwaves exploded. The Divine Dragon Island was fine because of the Ice Dragon's barrier. Qin Baishan's group of 5 was fine as well. After all, they were all Undead Realm experts. But the northern inland sea was almost destroyed. Even Feng Daji, who was guarding the northern coast, could feel the waves of battle that were surging towards him. This is indeed the young master's aura. But who is fighting the young master? The heavenly dragon's power is so pure. Could it be the Princess of Dragons? But is the Princess of Dragons that strong? Wait. It can't be the Prince of Dragons. The Prince of Dragons is an Undead Realm expert. Feng Daji was shocked. He looked at the depths of the sea and wanted to go and take a look. But his task was to guard this place. So he didn't dare to leave. Whoosh, whoosh. The shock waves were getting stronger. The wind was blowing and the waves were rolling. But the shock waves were blocked by the power of the two heaven-defying divine artifacts and didn't affect the Dragon God Mountain. Feng Daji, the Fire Lotus, Huai, and the five-clawed Golden Dragon had 8 heaven-defying divine artifacts. They could not only seal the dragons but also seal the shock waves of the battle in the inland sea. So, no matter how terrifying the battle was in the inland sea, it wouldn't hurt the creatures in the west, south, east, and north, unless the sovereign divine weapon was involved. But the dragons couldn't control this sovereign divine weapon except the ice dragon. So, the creatures in the divine land were absolutely safe.